to collapse right then and there. He does not recognize me, she realized as Rob embraced John, thumping him on the back. Jane politely offered her hand, and no one had even acknowledged her. Theon looked as if he was about to draw Rob's attention when suddenly Grey Wind was rushing towards her, a broken leather strap dangling from his neck from where he broke his stays. The direwolf took her down at the knees, sending Myrcella onto her backside, but the sting of it didn't matter as Grey Wind mauled her with his tongue, yipping in excitement like a common dog. Grey Wind! Rob snapped, but the direwolf did not listen, continuing his extensive tongue bath of her face. Myrcella could not help but laugh as Grey Wind began to tug at her shadow cat cloak, and, when Rob grabbed Grey Wind's broken leash, she found herself eye to eye with her husband. Rob froze, a complicated mixture of emotions dancing over his face, before managing, "Myrcella." "Rob," she choked out before the tears took her, flinging her arms around his neck, holding him so tightly she swore she would never let go again. As Rob pressed his face into her shoulder, his tears hot against her skin, Myrcella found herself staring at Jane Westerling, one hand pressed protectively over the swell of her stomach, and Myrcella knew nothing was ever going to be the same ever again. Chapter 5, The Bride of Winter. Chapter text. Lady Catelyn once told Myrcella that, if she did not know better, she would have sworn Myrcella was as northern as her husband. "The men respect you in a way they never have me," the older woman said as she brushed Myrcella's hair with gentle hands. "I have always been Ned Southron wife, but you they speak to as if you have always been at Winterfell. They would fight each other to the death for a single smile from you, and that is the greatest gift a lady can have, especially a lady of Winterfell." At the time, Myrcella was unbelievably flattered. She was still young then, Brynden still in her belly, and Lady Catelyn's words were sustenance to a girl starving for a mother. Cersei always told her it was wrong to become too close to your bannerman, that a lady was always to be seen but only heard when asked to speak and, even then, only to agree with her lord husband. Myrcella used to be certain her mother was wrong. There was nothing Myrcella enjoyed more than to be greeted enthusiastically by Rob's men, to be called Princess Stark by the great Jon or teased by Theon. Now the men looked at her with pity in their eyes if they looked at her at all. She made them uncomfortable just by existing. To be too kind to her was to risk upsetting Queen Jane, and none of the men knew which queen to keep happy. From the moment she pulled away from Rob in the dining hall, Jane Westerling at his back, Myrcella knew she could not act the way she once did. Neither the Maester or the Septon knew what to do with Robb Stark and his two wives, one wed before the Heart Tree, the other sworn loyalty in a September in the Crag. Robb did not understand any better than the learned men, and so Myrcella made the decision for him. Whether it killed her or not, Jane Westerling had married Robb before the Seven. She carried his child. Myrcella remembered a conversation she had with Jon on Nymeria's Wrath, remembered how disgusted he was at the idea of giving a child a bastard's name, and Myrcella would not force Jane's child to bear the name Snow. No, her child would be a Stark the same as Myrcella's own children, and she could not bring herself to hate the babe in Jane's belly no matter how much she hated the Westerlings. And, oh, did she hate the Westerlings, Lady Westerling in particular. The entire Westerling family was at Riverrun, even Elenia whose husband had perished at the Red Wedding alongside Rickon and Shaggy. Most of the time they rarely acknowledged Myrcella. She worked carefully to make sure her path rarely crossed Jane and her family, but, when it did, the courtly manners Cersei Lannister and Catelyn Stark taught her were always firmly in place. Lord Westerling and his sons were always unfailingly polite if somewhat awkward. Elenia wore a near constant expression for grief, though Myrcella did not know if it was for her husband or for Rickon. Jane was always quiet, always unsure, her eyes tracking Myrcella's movements the way Myrcella's eyes tracked hers. She felt her blood boil when she'd see Jane press a soft kiss to Robb's brow, when she'd ask Robb to tie up Grey Wind because he scared her family. Every time Myrcella saw the direwolf chained, she would lose him, angry at the Westerlings and angrier still at Robb. Her boys used to climb upon Grey Wind's back, clutching his fur and riding him as if he was a pony, and never once had the wolf even growled in displeasure. But Lady Westerling, she was the absolute worst. Myrcella remembered meeting Sybil Spicer at Tommen's wedding, and even then she had not cared for the woman, one of the few opinions Myrcella ever shared with her mother. Cersei had no tolerance for Sybil, whose family was both foreign and low-born, and the woman was not subtle in her schemes. Before Elenia's pregnancy became common knowledge, Sybil had tried her damnedest to secure one of Myrcella's Lannister cousins for Jane, and Tywin refused. Myrcella was certain Sybil was glad of the slight now, it had turned her daughter into a queen. And Sybil did not want anything to get in the way of her daughter's reign, especially troublesome first wives who rose from the dead. Though never overtly rude, Sybil constantly made comments in Myrcella's presence praising Jane and the child she carried, referring to the babe as the little prince and the future king. It took everything within Myrcella to not snap back, to remind the women there were 3 sons which came before Jane's, 3 with a better claim, but she did not. Life was difficult enough without bickering with Sybil. A new rhythm to life had to be found, and Myrcella found it. No matter how great her grief was when she woke, she reminded herself that her children were safe in the Vale, the Neck, and at Deepwood Motte, that Rob was alive and well, that Joffrey could not touch her. If she could survive the siege of Winterfell, the trek to the wall, life on the wall, the warmth of Riverrun was beyond tolerable. Lady Roslyn helped her wash the dye from her hair, gave her gowns to wear until new gowns could be made for her. The first day the maids helped to lace her into the fine green gown, her wild curls fastened down with jeweled pins. Myrcella caught sight of her reflection and began to cry. She looked so much like the lady she used to be and yet not like herself at all, and the maids all clucked, unsure how to respond. It took several minutes before Myrcella could pull herself together, before she could face the men and women of Riverrun. She was born a princess long before she wed a king, and it was Cersei Lannister's voice in her head as she went to break her fast with the rest of the castle. "You are a Lannister of Casterly Rock. We do not weep or stumble, we stare our enemies in their eyes and we smile." If she was going to survive at Riverrun, she would need to be more of a Lannister than had ever been. The only men who treated her as they ever had were Theon and Jon. Even Ed Murtully could hardly bear to meet her gaze, pity heavy in his eyes. Theon still made japes to her, stealing bits of bacon from her plate at breakfast, calling her spearwife when he saw the dragonglass dagger Jon gave her on the wall. Jon made sure to sit beside her at meals, to leave ghost for her when he was in councils with Robb, and Myrcella had never loved Jon Snow more than the day he brought her a letter sealed with the mark of the Uri, Stefan's uneven hand telling her how much he missed her and his siblings, how he hoped he could see her soon. They are not babies anymore, Myrcella realized as she folded the letter closed, setting it on her desk. It has been nearly 1.5 years since I have seen Stefan or Ricard, almost 8 moons since I have seen Brynden or the girls. The girls would not even know me to see me. The thought drove Myrcella to the Godswood, sinking to her knees before the heart tree as she cried, her tears mingling with prayers, pleading with the old gods to keep her children safe, to let them know how much they were loved and how desperately their mother wanted to be reunited with them. Myrcella prayed as she had never prayed before, her knees aching against the cold ground, but she did not rise, did not do anything but pray to the gods she was not even sure listened. The crackle of branches reached her eyes only a moment before Robb stepped into the clearing, stilling with surprise. Embarrassed, face swollen and slick with her tears, Myrcella tried to hurry to her feet only to stumble, her legs numb, her palms slammed into the ground painfully, but then Robb was there, pulling her to her feet, turning over her hands to assess the damage. "I am fine," she quickly assured HM, trying to pull back, her body aching at his gentle touch, but Robb held firm with a hand upon her elbow. "You do not look fine," he argued, carefully wiping her wet face with his warm gloves. "You look as if you will never smile again." "Stefan wrote me," she offered, trying not to press herself into Robb's arms as she so desperately wanted. I miss our children." Robb nodded solemnly. "As do I. I think of the last time we were all together at Greywater Watch, when you brought all the children to our bed. It was the most uncomfortable night of sleep in my life, but all of you looked so peaceful when I woke. I think of that night often as well." Dropping her gaze, unable to continue to meet Robb's blue eyes without confessing every secret in her heart, she blurted out, "Which is why I wish to join our children in the north." "What?" "Jon tells me Alysanne Mormont is setting sail to return to Bear Island to join with your forces in the north to take back Winterfell. Once on Bear Island, I could easily reach Deepwood Motte with your men." Robb opened his mouth to reply, but Myrcella rushed on. "The last memory I have of Brynden and our girls is them screaming, reaching for me while Sir Roderick pulled me away. I thought they were dead, Robb, and the only thing I want in the world is to hold them again." Face tightening with tension, Robb shook his head, his voice tight. "Ask me for anything, and I will gladly give it, but not this, my lady. I do not belong here." "That is not true." "My place is with our children," she insisted. "Your place is with me." Jerking out of his arms, needing the distance between them to remain strong, Myrcella shook her head. No, that is not my place anymore. Jane's place is with you. And it is cruel of you to ask me to stay and face that truth every day. Frustration swelled in his eyes. What would you have me do, Myrcella? Tell me and I will do it. You say you do not want me to have the sept and put aside my marriage, but you are angry I will not. What would you have? I would have had you honor our marriage, she shouted, her anger finally bursting. I would have had you wait until you thought my body was cold before you climbed atop Jane Westerling. I would have had you show my memory the respect I showed yours. Smacking away his hands when he reached for her, Myrcella rushed on, do you think I could not have found some man to warm my bed? Do you think there was not a single man between here and the wall that would have been grateful to spend the night between my thighs? Stop, Rob ordered, his voice tight with disgust at just the idea of what Myrcella was suggesting. She had never wanted to hurt Rob, had never deliberately said anything to wound him, but the pain was too sharp, too raw. Myrcella wanted him to ache the way she did. I spent 3 moons sharing a bed with your brother, who mourned you as well as I did. Mayhaps we both could have found some comfort on that ship. Stop it. Why, I could go find Theon right now. Myrcella gasped as Rob grabbed her upper arms, jerking her body towards his. It did not hurt, but it certainly startled her. Rob had never touched her with anything but tenderness, and Myrcella wondered if she had pushed him too far, if he was not the man she remembered. She could still hear the echoes of her father's hand against her mother's cheek, and Myrcella suddenly remembered a bit of advice Cersei gave her before departing from Winterfell after her wedding. Do not love your husband too much, Myrcella. When he disappoints you, and he will, for he is a man, it will devastate you all the more. But Rob did not shout or dictate, he did not shake her or strike her. Instead he slid his hands up, cupping her face between his palms, bringing her face close enough to kiss. I wed you before the heart tree in front of our families and the old gods. I put 4 children in your belly and held you as they came into this world. Until the day I die, you are my wife. Myrcella shivered at his hot breath against her skin. When his mouth pressed against hers, hungry and desperate, she responded without thought, grasping his clothing, his hair, anything to get closer, to stay close. Rob groaned against her mouth, his hands sliding down her body to wrap around her back, pulling her even closer, and Myrcella felt the wetness start between her thighs, her nipples hardening beneath her shift. Selah, he breathed, fisting the material of her skirts, beginning to raise them. It was only as the cold air hit her legs Myrcella snapped back to reality, twisting away from his familiar touch. No, she gasped, pushing away his hands when he tried to pull her back. No, Rob, I won't, we cannot. Rob panted as he ran his fingers through his hair. Myrcella could see his cock pressing hard against the front of his breeches, and she hated the flare of desire in her stomach. He was here and she could have him if she wanted, and, oh, did she want? Never had Myrcella wanted anything more than to let Rob take her, to have him claim her again. But there was no honor in this, and Rob would regret it, burdened down by his conscience when his blood cooled, when Ned Stark's voice returned to his head. I love you, Myrcella rasped, her voice trembling. I have loved you since I was 12 years old, and I will love you until the day I die. But you made vows to Jane in the September and got a child on her as well, and that child deserves your name. It is an innocent, and I will not take from that child what I hope Jane Westerling will not take from mine. Myrcella, he began, voice thick with anguish. She shook her head, holding up her hands, certain she could not bear to hear his words. If you will not send me to our children, then I beg you to please leave me be. Do not come to me like this again. Rob said nothing, dropping his head as he managed half of a nod. Myrcella could not look at him as she fled the godswood, certain that, if she looked back, she would be lost. The day Jane Westerling sent a request to Myrcella to dine, Myrcella was certain it was a mistake. Jane rarely even made eye contact with her, let alone initiated conversation. Elenia was Jane's constant companion as well as their eldest brother's wife, and Myrcella was certain Sybil impressed upon Jane how dangerous Myrcella could be to their situation. Mayhaps she only wants to be kind, John suggested that afternoon as he polished Longclaw. Myrcella, who sat upon his bed, scoffed. Clearly you do not understand how ladies think. This, she declared, holding up Jane's note, is Sybil Spicer's way of finding out what my intentions are. Amusement tugged at John's features. Why, I had no idea the dining plans of ladies were so intense. If she had sent you an invitation to breakfast, would you require a dagger? I shall require a dagger in a moment, she retorted, throwing a pillow at him. John laughed, sheathing his sword. I do not know what sorts of plans Lady Westerling has, but Jane is a sweet girl with a gentle heart. I cannot imagine she is luring you to the lion's den in order to plot an attack. Of course not. I'm the lion, remember. Flopping backwards like an overdramatic child, Myrcella sighed, I hate this. I want to climb into my bed, pull the furs over my head, and remain there until the world is right again. A thoroughly mature plan. Myrcella felt the mattress sag as John sat beside her. Rolling her head, she saw John's grey eyes alight with sympathy and affection. You are the strongest person I have ever known. I would think after the siege, after making it to the wall, after everything, Jane Westerling would be nothing at all. I am tired of fighting. Aren't we all? Myrcella thought of the first time she met Jon Snow, all those years ago. She remembered how pale his face was without his beard, how his smile was not as open and free as Robb's. They all had been children then, playing at adulthood, trying to act as they had been taught with no comprehension of what was to come. Now John's face was weathered from years upon the wall, his beard dark and thick, his eyes always clear and heavy with all the words he never said. If she had not seen Jon Snow literally rise from the ash, Myrcella would never have doubted him to be Eddard Stark's son. Pushing herself up, getting to her feet, Myrcella smiled down at John, brushing his dark hair off his forehead to bestow a kiss upon his brow, her closest friend now. John's hands settled on her hips naturally, and, when she pulled back, he returned her smile. It will get easier, he stated, his voice so certain Myrcella almost believed him. The door opened before she could reply, and Myrcella turned to see Robb standing in the doorway, his face as still as the statue of Baelor. John's hands instantly fell from her hips, and Myrcella knew how this must look, especially when she saw the anger start to flicker in Robb's handsome face. The urge to explain was strong, but Myrcella did not. She knew John would explain more than enough for the both of them, anything to appease his brother. I should dress for dinner, she announced, smiling at the brothers placidly. As she moved to pass Robb, his hand caught her wrist, stilling her, and Myrcella waited, braced herself for whatever accusation he was about to make. Instead he said, you do not have to dine with Jane. I will give you leave. It is fine, she lied. I do not mind. As her maids helped her dress, Myrcella realized she never lied to Robb until Jane Westerling. Myrcella was genuinely surprised when she arrived at Jane's apartments to find she was the only guest for dinner, Elenia and her other companions sent away. Jane stood timidly near the table, the bulge of her babe somewhat hidden by the elaborate front of her soft yellow gown. The color did not suit her, giving her skin a sickly pallor. Her hair was intricately done and a double-stranded rope of pearls hung around her throat. Jane Westerling certainly looked the part of a queen, far more than Myrcella did in her borrowed gown in tully colors with her butchered hair. But you are prettier than she is, a voice in her head which sounded remarkably like Cersei said, and of far nobler blood. You are younger and know Robb Stark better than she. This girl cannot compete with you. Jane's hands shook as she gestured for Myrcella to sit, and it surprised her to notice how scared Robb's new bride was of her. It made the bitterness in her heart abate, at least, temporarily. Having spent so much of her life in fear, Myrcella did not wish to terrorize her. At first Jane only broached safe topics, asking her if she had ever spent time in the Westerlands at Casterly Rock, describing her time as a companion to Elaine Tarly while she and Tommen were at the Rock, her witnessing Tommen unseat a man in a joust held by Kevan Lannister to celebrate his son's wedding. Myrcella politely offered response, answering questions about the Red Keep, about the Wall, about the swordplay Jane had witnessed Myrcella take part in with Jon and Theon in the yard. If the circumstances were different, Myrcella suspected she would have liked Jane Westerling, and she hated that. I do not believe my family ever thanked you, but I wish to do so, Jane said as lemon cakes were placed upon the table. Thank me. For what you did for Elenia's child. Jane took a sip of her sweet wine before continuing. Elenia has always been a bit of a dreamer, and she adored Rickon Stark. When the child quickened, she had hoped Lord Stark would agree to a marriage, but she was devastated when father said she could not keep the babe, and I have heard it told you always treated the baby as your own. I wish to thank you for giving my niece a mother she might not otherwise have had. Lia's happy face filled Merciless' mind. She is my niece as well. Thanks are not necessary, but it is kind of you to offer them. Jane inhaled deeply before asking, may I speak freely? I would prefer it. I wish you no ill will. If there had been even the thinnest of hope you were alive, I would never have gone to Rob. She drew the corner of her lip between her teeth for a moment before continuing. Rob had just taken the crag when word of the siege reached him. I was there when Theon told him of his father's deaths, of your death, of your children's. I have never seen a man so broken. His sorrow was what kept him in the Westerlands, sending Rookon to the twins in his place to treat with the Freys. When we heard of the Red Wedding, the guilt nearly crushed him. Not even word of your children's safety could bring him back. I went to him that night to offer support or comfort and... Mercilla did not need her to continue, the comforting she had done was what haunted Mercilla's nightmares. And then he wed you. A blush bloomed high on her cheeks. I was a maid, and he felt especially guilty in light of what had happened between Rookon and Elenia. He wed me in the September the next day and brought us and our men to Riverrun. Why are you telling me this? Because I know how much he loved you, how much he loves you still. Jane lifted her eyes, and Mercilla could see tears shining there. I hear the men and the servants talk. They all tell tales of your marriage, how happy and in love you were. When the men thought you died, even the great Jon mourned. I heard the toasts they gave in your honor. They called you Kingmaker and Princess Stark and 100 other names, and some of the fiercest men I've ever seen looked as if they might cry. They all love you still, and they hate me and my child for even existing. Jane smiled mirthlessly. Some of them even call me the usurper. If you tell Rob. If I tell Rob, he will root every last one of them from the castle, but it will not change what people think. Jane carefully wiped a straight hair. I am the false queen in the north, and no Northman will ever love me. Rob does. Mercilla could not help but snipe. Rob is fond of me, I suppose. He treats me kindly and makes sure I am comfortable. But he does not smile or laugh with me, he does not come to my chamber but once a moon cycle. Jane's blush deepened as she confessed, I do my best to be pleasing but he always leaves after, we have not spent a night together since the first. Reynold says he has seen him go to the Godswood after, but I do not know. Jane. Lady Roslyn told me he shared your chamber. Jane rushed on, words falling from her mouth in an avalanche. She says Lord Edmure used to jape that he would get with child just from watching the two of you look at each other. She said Rob was always laughing with you, always pulling you into a corner to kiss you. I begged Roslyn to tell me how you did it, and do you know what she told me? She existed. Jane answered without pausing for a response. Unsure how to respond, Mercilla settled on, I was with the Starks from the time I was 8. I was all he knew. Jane smiled thinly. You are kind to lie. She ghosted her hands over her stomach. I shall have his child in 2 months, and I fear he will not love it the way he loves your children. That is not true, Mercilla argued. Rob will love your child as well as he loves all our children, including Lia who has not a drop of his blood. The child is innocent. The tears rolled silently down her cheeks but Jane did not bother to bat them away this time. I love him, Mercilla, and I want to be a good wife. I want desperately to make him happy. And you make him happy. Jane. My mother says I should demand he send you away somewhere, demand he officially put you aside. She says I cannot be queen, my child cannot be legitimate if you are here. When I even suggested it, Rob said he would not dishonor you that way. My mother says I am to be firm with you, to order you to stay far from him. If that is what you want. I want a happy husband, Jane cut in, her voice more forceful than Mercilla had ever heard it, and I want to be a good queen. I know it will make my mother wrath, but I asked you here so I could beg your help. My help. I thought, if you could teach me about the North End, and how to make Rob happy. It took a moment for Mercilla to puzzle out what precisely Jane Westerling was asking of her, the intent buried beneath her stammering and silences. When it struck her, hard as hammer to the chest, Mercilla could not catch her breath. Certain she was wrong, desperate to believe Rob's bride had not asked her what she thought she was being asked, Mercilla inquired, are you asking me how to pleasure Rob? No, not just that. Jane quickly tried to clarify. While I wish to make him happy in that respect, I also wish to make him happy in all respects. I had hoped you could tell me how to make him laugh, how to make the men respect me, how to keep him in my chamber the way you kept him in yours. You cannot make a Northman do anything, you stupid girl. I fear I would be a poor teacher. There are no tricks, Jane. As I said, I have spent more than half my life with the Starks, with Robb. When you have known him longer, it will come easier. Jane nodded somewhat shakily before venturing, and the bedding. Is there something I can do that he likes? When Myrcella said nothing, she explained, my mother told me things to try, but nothing seems to move him. When I try harder, he seems embarrassed, tells me I do not have to do those things. I was a maid when I wed, I do not know what else to try. Myrcella felt nausea rising in her throat. I do not feel comfortable discussing this. Of course Jane immediately agreed. I simply, if I cannot satisfy him, he will seek satisfaction elsewhere. And it would be less of a dishonor if he went to you rather than, if you did not swell, I could pretend it is not. Jane did not finish the thought, her cheek burning so brightly red, but Myrcella understood precisely what she was saying, and she had never felt so humiliated in her life. Myrcella did not hear the rest of the conversation, smiling when required and answering if necessary. By the time she left Jane Westerling's apartments, she felt more numb than she had been in the forests before the wall, her body moving without registering anything. She managed to descend the stairs, determined to make it back to her own chamber on the other side of the castle, when Robb, Theon, and Jon crossed her path, laughing at something. When Theon spotted her, he grinned, holding out a skin of wine. My favorite spear wife. How was your dinner? Myrcella took the skin, swallowing heavy and fast, taking in as much wine as she could as quickly as possible. Wiping her mouth, she thrust the skin back to him. Wonderful, thank you. Did something happen? Robb asked, his brow furrowed in concern. She looked at him, her husband who was not her husband, the only man she had ever loved, and suddenly the weight of the past few months came down upon her, Sybil Spicer's pointed comments, the tension from men who once greeted her freely, Jane Westerling's presence, the child in Jane's belly. Myrcella did not think about what she did next, so blinded by the fury in her broken heart she could not bear it any longer. She shoved at Robb's chest as hard as she could, catching him off guard, forcing him to stumble backwards as she continued to push, shouting, I hate you. I hate you. I wish I had never met you, let alone wed you. I hate that I ever bore your children. You are worse than Joffrey has ever been, for at least he is honest in the sort of man he is. Arms then circled her from behind Theon or Jon, she wasn't sure, but still she fought, trying to get to Robb, who looked as hurt as she had ever seen him. I should never have fought so hard to return to you. I should have died in the snow with Roderick. It would have been a kinder end than this. The words seemed to spur Robb into action as he shouted in return, how can you say that? How can you even think it? Myrcella pushed hard at the arms around her, Theon's reluctantly releasing her, but she did not step forward, did not try to strike Robb again. Instead she spat, you will happy to know your wife has given you leave to fuck me, provided you do not get a child on me. I do not know the cost of a whore, but I imagine you should pay me more, seeing as how I am a princess. The color drained from Robb's face at her words, and she could feel both Theon and Jon shift in discomfort. Good, she thought uncharitably. I hope they all choke on their northern honor. Myrcella. She did not wait to hear Robb's words, pushing past him, her body quaking with rage as tears streaked her face. By the time she reached her chambers, Myrcella could barely see through her tears, slamming the door with all of her strength. Flinging herself upon the bed, Myrcella pushed her face into the pillows and screamed. Screamed for Eddard, for Rickon, for her children, screamed until there was not air left in her lungs, and only then did she let sleep take her. At first light, Robb came to her room, a letter in his hand. Asher Greyjoy is willing to send a ship to meet you at the crag to take you to Deepwood Motte if you still wish to go. I do. Robb nodded mutely, handing her the letter with the broken seal of the Iron Isles. Theon and Jon will ride with you as well, 20 of my men. The Westerlands are still held by your grandfather, and it is not safe. He was almost out of her chamber when Myrcella cried, wait, please. When Robb complied, his face deceptively neutral, she sighed, I did not meant the things I said last night. I could not regret everything, especially our children. I do not hate you, though, gods know, it would be easier if I could. Rob closed the chamber door, rubbing absently at his too long beard. At long last he said, I was not built to be a king, not without you at my side. You made me king and I repaid you by giving your crown to another. The day I wed Jane in the September was the day Arianne Martell withdrew Dornish forces from the Riverlands. It was also the day Highgarden and the Stormlands stopped even discussing joining us against Joffrey. Rob. The North and its allies may fight for me, but the South, it was going to fight for you, not a Westerling of the Crag. He chuckled mirthlessly. My mother said I lost the war the moment I said vows to Jane. The war is not lost, Myrcella objected. No, he agreed, but even when we win, it will not feel like winning. Rob crossed to the window, staring out at the yard, his back to her. My dreams are full of Winterfell, of our children playing, happy and safe. And then the dreams turn into nightmares as I imagine my father's end. What happened to our people, what happened to you? What good is a war if you lose everything you were fighting for? Winterfell still stands, as do our children. I will write Arianne, write the Tyrells and Renly, and have them join their strengths to yours. Myrcella moved to stand near him, his pain instinctively drawing her to offer comfort. Winterfell was my home, and they drove me from it. They killed the people I loved as well, and I vowed I would kill them all. Lannisters always pay their debts. She could see his smile reflected in the window pane. When have you ever behaved like a Lannister? I plotted against the Iron Throne. That is a holy Lannister trait. And the Master-at-Arms says I swing a sword well enough to make even the Kingslayer proud. At the rate I am going, I shall be shitting gold by my name day. Rob laughed, loud and free, and Myrcella felt the ice on her heart melt. Jane Westerling was right about one thing, Rob did not laugh anymore, not the way he used to when the world still made sense. The sound of it brought laughter to her lips, and soon they were both laughing, an edge of hysteria to them both. When it tapered off, Rob turned to face her, his eyes a little brighter, and Myrcella caught a glimpse of the man who had ridden to war a lifetime ago. If I begged you to stay, would you? A king does not beg. A man does. Brushing her cheek with the backs of his fingers, he murmured, stay with me. I know it is selfish, the most selfish request I have ever made of you, but please stay. I have more need of you now than I ever have. Rob, please. How many times have you said I am hopeless at the politics of court? War, I understand, but you are better with people than anyone I know. You once yelled at me because I did not let you go to Renly, to do what you are best at. I am offering you that now. This war is as much yours as mine. It is the war which will secure the North for our children, for Stefan. Resting her hands upon his broad chest, she pointed out, the Westerlings will never stand for it. The others can take Lord and Lady Westerling and their useless knights as well. Slipping his arms around her waist, pressing his lips against her temple, he entreated, do not make me tell Asher to come. I will be better, I will make this better. She hated her traitorous body, the way it came alive at his touch, at the scent of him. Myrcella ached to press herself into his arms, to take his mouth, to agree to anything as long as he never stopped touching her. What was worse was the knowledge he would if only she asked. I will stay if you swear me a promise. Anything. Pulling back to look him in the eye, Myrcella ordered, you swear to me that our sons will always come before the sons you have with Jane, that no matter what happens between us, they will still be your heirs. I will swear it before the heart tree if you wish it. Stefan, Ricard, and Brynden will always comes first. Cupping her face, tilting her head back so he could better look at her, he smiled warmly. So you will stay. On one more condition. Anything. She reached up and tugged on the ends of his beard. Fix your beard. It looks ridiculous. Rob laughed heartily, pressing a kiss to her forehead. As you wish. The things I do for love, Myrcella thought bitterly as she put on her gown, preparing to face the day once again. Myrcella was in the yard practicing swords with Jon when Arya arrived at Riverrun, leaping from her horse before it had even fully stopped, rushing towards the two of them with the wildness which drove Lady Catelyn to distraction. Her embrace was vigorous, it sent both she and Arya to the snow, but Myrcella did not mind, her laughter mingling with Arya's as the snow soaked through their clothing. I bloody knew you got away. Arya exclaimed as they untangled themselves, getting to their feet as John laughed. I told Rob that if you made it to the Godswood, you'd be fine. You've been in the north more than I have, but that fucking idiot wouldn't listen to me. Arya Myrcella laughed with a shake of her head, wishing she could be half as bold as her good sister. What? He is a fucking idiot, sticking his cock in a Westerling. You'd have thought he learned from Rickon. Turning to John, grinning widely, she flung her arms around him. And you? You get killed, come back to life with fire, and you don't even send a bloody raven. I should kill you again. John laughed, pressing a hard kiss to the crown of Arya's head. And where would I have sent that raven? No one can ever find the she-wolf. Arya rolled her eyes at the name before a mischievous grin crossed her face. Well, the she-wolf returns with food meant for Lannister men, gowns meant for the queen, and enough dragons to buy the Westerlands twice over. Just wait until my men get here. I cannot believe you have men, John said. I am 22, dear brother, and a better blade than any man in Westeros, even your kingslaying uncle. Flinging an arm around Myrcella's shoulder, she declared, you must take me to our idiot king so I can be welcomed back properly, and then we have much to discuss. Myrcella had always wanted sisters. As a child, it seemed to be the only silver lining of her betrothal, earning Sansa and Arya. While Myrcella liked sweet Sansa, it was Arya who amused, who spoke brashly and behaved even worse, who refused to practice deception or bend her knee because it was proper. Even now Myrcella envied Arya, striding into the castle in her men's garb, her dark braid bouncing against her back, a sword on her hip. Men not only respected Arya, they followed her, and Myrcella wondered how Arya managed not to buckle under the weight of it all. Arya marched boldly into the room where Robb was meeting with his advisors, including Ed Muir, Goran Westerling and his sons. Myrcella tried to hesitate in the entryway, but Arya pulled her along, clearly uncaring about making anyone uncomfortable. Robb grinned at the sight of his sister, breaking off his sentence, to come around the table, embracing her tightly. I thought you were in the Reach. And I have returned with food and gold. Cocking her hip, Arya gestured to Myrcella, trying to make herself small against the wall. And I think you owe me an apology. Robb managed to look abashed as he nodded. Yes, I do. I will not make you grovel in front of your men, she declared with a teasing smile, but I will not share Mace Tyrell's strong wine with you or his fruit. But I am the king. Robb mock protested, his grin only growing. Only in the north, she countered with a giggle, and we are in the south. Nodding towards Myrcella, she added, why, I think Myrcella has a more of a claim to my spoils than you. After all, she is still a princess of the Iron Throne. Tell me, good sister, do you care for Dornish blood oranges? Myrcella grinned, her eyes briefly meeting Robb's, knowing they were his very favorite treat. I adore them. Heat flared in Robb's eyes, and he caught the corner of his lip between his teeth. Myrcella felt her blood warm beneath his gaze, and, for a moment, it was as if the past few months had not happened. You two are cruel. I should throw you both in cells. Arya laughed, her hand dropping to fondle the hilt of her sword. You are more than welcome to try. Gendry and the men will be arriving soon, and they will need a great deal of assistance unloading everything. In the meantime, I am kidnapping your poor, forgotten wife until dinner is served. Myrcella cast a look over her shoulder as Arya dragged her from the room, and Robb winked, his grin positively sinful. It was easy to forget Jane Westerling lay abed upstairs, her stomach so swollen it hurt for her to walk, when he looked at her so. Myrcella had just slipped into the steaming water of her bath when someone knocked on her chamber door. Not lifting her head from the rim of the tub, expecting it to be one of the servants delivering the stolen, altered gowns Arya promised her, Myrcella called for them to enter, keeping her eyes closed. You may put them on the bed. My gods, you're beautiful, Robb breathed, startling Myrcella into sitting straight up, covering her breasts instinctively. Amusement filled his face as he set the collection of gowns upon her bed, his eyes never wandering from her body. I've made love to you 1,000 times, watched you nurse our children, and slept nude beside you every night for 5 years. We are past the point of modesty, are we not? Keeping her hands firmly in place, she retorted, yes, when I was your wife, we were far past that point. But as Sybil Spicer is so fond of reminding me, I am not your wife, and, as such, you are being incredibly inappropriate. Robb smirked. I thought the idea of aggravating Sybil Spicer would appeal to you. She could not help but grin. There are many things which appeal to me that I do not indulge in. His eyebrows arched as his smile turned positively wolfish. I would be happy to indulge you, my lady. You need only ask. The laughter bubbled out before she could catch it. To everyone else, Rob was the young wolf, the king in the north, a serious man with serious tasks who had no time for foolishness. It was only with her he became Rob, the playful boy, the sensuous man, the only person who made Myrcella feel positively wicked. She missed seeing this side of him, ached for his wit and his comfort, for the feel of him inside her. Since agreeing to stay at Riverrun, Myrcella had caught glimpses of her Rob. He had kept his promise of trimming his beard, the neatly kept auburn hair allowing her to see the cut of his jaw and his mouth more clearly. Theon commented on how Rob was smiling again, was able to laugh without guilt again. His voice was heavy with innuendo when delivering the words, obviously seeking an explanation, but Myrcella had none. Even Jane recognized the change in him, her own wan smiles being offered with more frequency, but, for every one of Rob's smiles, Myrcella felt Sybil frown, suspicious. All of Riverrun thinks I have taken him back to my bed, and Jane herself gave me leave to do so. Is it really so dishonorable to lay with my husband? Lady Catelyn would say yes, that until the situation was resolved and Jane was being recognized as the queen, she should not interfere. Queen Cersei would say no, that Jane Westerling was nothing more than a king's folly with a bastard in her belly. And how does my lord wish to indulge me? Mayhaps she was more Lannister than she thought. Rob approached the tub like the predator on his banner, running his fingers around the heavy copper rim. Myrcella unfolded her arms over her chest, settling back into the water, letting him look at her the way he had countless times before. His gaze trailed over her body appreciatively and she felt herself warm with pleasure. Since coming to Riverrun, she had managed to regain some of the weight she lost since fleeing Winterfell, but Myrcella was still thinner than she had ever been, her breasts smaller, her curves less comely. As Rob perched upon the edge beside her, his fingers dipping into the hot water, Myrcella knew her paranoia about her body was unwarranted. In every way a man can indulge a woman. Drawing his fingers up her ribs, tracing the curve of her breast, his voice was soft as silk as he inquired, "Does that sound appealing, my love?" Myrcella rose up out of the water, clutching at his shirt as she pulled his mouth down against hers. She could feel Rob's smile against her lips, his tongue chasing hers as he leaned closer. She tried to draw him closer, her hand falling to his laces, when Rob suddenly slipped, the kiss breaking as Rob gave a shout, now sitting in her bath fully clothed. Myrcella exploded into laughter, Rob following suit. Only his boots had managed to escape the water, even his sword submerged, and it gave him a decidedly UN king-like appearance, especially when she could not resist the temptation to splash him. Water clung to his beard and eyelashes, and, in his joy, he looked 10 years younger. "You think this is funny," he playfully growled, reaching down to pull off his boots, tossing them to the ground before flinging off his shirts and sword belt. Pulling his legs into the tub, Rob rose to his knees and pulled her close, laughter still shaking her body. "I fear we are out of practice," she giggled, struggling to push his pants and small clothes from his hips, the material clinging tightly as a second skin. "Then we shall practice until the sun rises." "The sun has not yet set." Rob's teeth ghosted over her shoulder. "I know." Myrcella managed to roll his pants far enough to take his cock, hard and heavy, in her hand, and Rob moaned against her ear, his voice so achingly needy it made her throb. She thought of the first time she had ever gone to him, the pursue rather than the pursued. They were still newly married then, her innocence still intact enough not to recognize she was already growing his children in her womb. With Catelyn and Rickon headed to King's Landing, she found her days empty and ended up watching Rob and Theon in the yard sparring. While she recognized the desire she felt for Rob, it was the first time true want filled her. When he had seen her watching, Rob called for a break, hurrying over to make sure she did not need anything. "Just you," she had said, shocking herself at how brazen she was being. "You should join me upstairs." She never did know what he told Theon and Sir Roderick. All she knew was he hurried to their bedchamber and was half breathless when he arrived, gasping at how she impatiently tore at his laces. They did not even manage to remove all of their clothing before he was inside her, chanting her name like a promise and a curse. When they finished, he laughed and said he liked how she could surprise him. She wanted to surprise him now, to remind him of who she was, to claim him. Myrcella knew from that terrible conversation with Jane Westerling how Rob left her bed unsatisfied, and she wanted to exploit that knowledge. It was unkind and petty, mayhaps even manipulative, but Myrcella wanted Rob to remember that it was she who made his blood rush, his body burn. Catelyn Stark may have raised her, shaped her into the wife and mother she became, but Cersei Lannister taught her long ago that a woman's only power over her husband was being able to give him what no other woman could. Whether it's counsel or cunt, if it is the best he receives, he will not wander far. Come here, Rob urged huskily as Myrcella managed to wrestle his pants free, tossing them over the edge of the tub. She slid easily into his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. She felt his hand slip beneath the water, his fingers stroking lightly between her legs. Myrcella trembled as his lips began to rediscover her throat, slip sliding across her shoulders and collarbone. Her breath caught as Rob eased one finger inside of her, a pinch of pain reminding her how long it had been since the last time he touched her like this. Yes, he asked as she pitched her hips, wordlessly asking for more. Yes, she panted, rising slightly on her knees. She felt Rob at her entrance, guiding hands on her hips, and she could not stifle her cries as they joined. Half moan and half laugh, Rob breathed, the whole castle is going to hear you. Good, she sighed shakily, grinding down against him, throbbing tightly around him. Then they will know. Know what? Myrcella's head fell back as one large hand settled on her breast, another dropping to caress the point where they were joined, Rob's calloused thumb making her snap her hips impatiently. That you're mine. Rob slid his hand into her hair, forcing her to look at him. His eyes were the brightest blue she had ever seen, his face flush with passion, and Myrcella leaned forward, trying to capture his mouth as her pleasure built. I am yours as you are mine, he swore, the pace of his hips increasing. You can never doubt that. She mauled his mouth, catching his bottom lip between her teeth and tugging, drawing a rough cry from him. Until the morning, she panted. And then you're hers again. Anger flashed in his eyes, and Myrcella gasped as he rose away from the end of the tub, holding her tightly against him. There was not an inch of space between their bodies, and she knew she would bear bruises on her back from how tightly he clutched her. And Jon? Are you his? Jon, she repeated in confusion even as she twisted her hips, desperate for friction. If I wanted Jon, he'd be the one in this tub, wouldn't he? Rob thrust upward sharply, Myrcella shouting at the sensation, before he kissed her with an almost brutal intensity. I will kill any man who tries to take you from me ever again. Then mayhaps I should open your sweet wife's throat, she panted as she rode Rob viciously, her pleasure close to peaking, for fucking my husband. The only woman I want to fuck is you, he retorted, pinching her nipple as she began to come. High, breathless cries echoing in the room. Oh, fuck, Myrcella, and then he was shouting too, blasphemies and her name tangling on his tongue. Rob collapsed back against the tub, taking Myrcella with him, their bodies still joined. She laid limply upon his chest, waiting for her breathing to regulate, the wild thumping of Rob's heart against her cheek. His fingers carded through her damp, tangled hair, his lips soft against the crown of her head, and Myrcella felt the fight draining out of her, her anger dissipating as Rob splayed his hands against her back. I love Jon as I love Tommen, she said after several minutes, twisting her face so she could look at Rob. I would never take him to my bed. Jane is nothing like you. That is why I took her to bed. Idly drawing shapes on his chest, the texture of the auburn hair which grew there rough against her fingers, she broached her greatest fear in the softest of whispers. Do you love her, Rob? How could I, when all the love I've ever had has been spent on you? Myrcella pressed her face against the warm, wet skin of his neck, tasting the salt on his skin. I know the feeling. The sky was just starting to lighten when someone knocked on the door of Myrcella's bedchamber. Rob did not wake beside her, his face buried in a pillow, the bruises from the day's earlier battle still fresh on his skin. She had pressed kisses to each and every one, to the scars he already bore and the marks which would leave new ones, and, even through the ache in his body, he had taken her twice. Over the past 3 weeks, not a single night had passed where Rob did not come to her bed, always sleeping soundly beside her and waking before the servants to steal back to his room. I have written the High Septon, Rob murmured before drifting to sleep, to set aside my marriage to Jane on the grounds you are alive. I will legitimize the babe, and I will arrange a match for Jane. She loves you, Myrcella reminded him as her own eyes began to droop. I've spoken to her. She understands. Burying his face in her hair, he sighed, she has a gentle heart. She knows this is what's best. Myrcella found her robe, wrapping it loosely around her body as she moved across the room. The last person she expected to find on the other side of the door was Elenia Westerling, pale and hastily dressed. "Forgive me for waking you, my lady," Elenia began softly, "but my sister has gone to the birthing bed, and she has asked for the king." Blushing furiously, she said, "My mother said I should check your chamber before going to the king's." Resisting the urge to make a biting comment about Sybil Spicer, Myrcella directed, "A moment, please, Elenia," before closing the door. Guilt began to swell in her chest. "Jane Westerling is about to birth his child and he is in your bed," but Myrcella pushed it down, carefully shaking Rob awake. "It is not day yet," Rob protested, attempting to pull the furs over his head like a child. "Jane is the birthing bed, my love. You must rise." Rob sat up, sleep forgotten. By instinct he reached for his clothing, hurriedly dressing, and she remembered the vague pall of panic which always accompanied her children's births, the wildness which licked at Rob when he felt useless. It was strange to be on this side of it, to see him racing about without the laboring woman being Myrcella, and suddenly she ached acutely for her scattered children, for the children she still hoped to bear. It was not until she handed him his boots that Rob realized what was happening. He opened his mouth, an apology beginning to fall from his lips, but Myrcella quickly pressed her hand over his mouth. No child should enter the world with its father apologizing for its existence. Cupping his face, kissing him lightly, she said, "Go to her. She will be scared and you will bring her peace." As Rob rushed down the hallway, Elenia looked her sadly in the eye before following, a shadow of the girl Myrcella remembered dancing with Rob at Tommen's wedding. As she climbed back into bed, the scent of Rob heavy on the sheets, Myrcella tried to summon to memory Lia's face, the feel of Elenia and Rukun's daughter in her arms, the way she would rest her tiny hand against Myrcella's breast as she nursed. Elenia's memories of her daughter were all those of loss, including her memories of Rukun. "When the war is over, we will bring Elenia to Winterfell so she can meet Lia. Mayhaps there is another match which can be made for her, one which will keep her far from Sybil and close to Rukun's daughter." Myrcella was in the yard with Arya, Theon, and Jon, watching in amusement as Arya effortlessly unarmed Theon every time. When Rob emerged from the castle, an exhausted smile on his face. Jon noticed him first and called, "Do I have a niece or nephew?" "Nephew," Rob answered, his smile becoming a grin. "Ned." And then there were congratulations being bandied about, Theon clapping Rob on the back, Arya remarking how she always felt better with Ned Stark in the world. Myrcella hated the thought which came to her brain, the disappointment the baby was not a girl. It was silly, of course. Rob doted more upon Joanna and Lia than he ever had the boys, always lifting them from Myrcella's arms to press kisses to their heads. If Jane's babe had been a girl, he would have loved her just as much because the sex did not matter to Rob. Lady Catelyn once told her some men took to fatherhood better than others, and Rob's most favorite responsibility had always been his children. Robert never took to it. He barely even looked at the three of us, let alone played with us. That always fell to Jaime or Tyrion. I wonder if Jaime ever wanted to be our father, if he ever asked my mother for the chance. Rob was embracing Edmure when his eyes met Myrcella's over his uncle's shoulder. His smile faltered for a moment, the reality of the situation asserting itself, but Myrcella smiled through the ache in her heart. She meant, she said, she did not wish Jane's son ill. Whether she liked it or not, little Ned was now her children's half-brother, and she would make better peace with that fact than Catelyn Stark ever had. She saw the baby 2 evenings later when Jane requested her presence. Lady Sybil sat in a chair beside the bed along with Elenia and Reynold's wife Eleanor. The older woman instantly got to her feet, spitting, "How dare you show your face here?" "I invited her," Mother Jane spoke up, her voice still frail from the birth. Sybil glared at her daughter. "Your husband spends his nights in her bed, and you bring her here to look upon your son. She is a Lannister, Jane. Who knows what she will do to your poor son?" "I would never hurt a child," Myrcella immediately protested. "If you knew me at all, you would know that." Sybil scoffed. "Oh, I know you, princess. I have known you Lannisters from my very first day, and I know what evil lies in you, the sort of evil which can only come from a woman whelping her brother's children. You may have the king fooled, but I see you perfectly." "Mother, stop," Jane ordered, surprising Myrcella with the strength she managed to imbue in it. "You will leave us now." "Jane." That was not a request, the brunette interrupted, and Myrcella recognized that voice. It was the one a queen used to chastise an unruly subject. Myrcella did not speak until the Westerling women had left. She stood patiently near the bed, trying not to stare at the fussing bundle in Jane's arms. When Jane bid her to sit, Myrcella complied, finally seeing little Ned for the first time. He was a large baby, larger than any of Myrcella's children, and he had Rob's look, his hair as red as Joanna's, his eyes as blue as the twins. She knew from Lady Roslyn that a wet nurse had been hired. Jane was still too weak to wake as often as the baby required for feedings. "He is a beautiful baby," she offered, sincerely meaning it. Jane smiled into Ned's face, a hint of uncertainty in her face as she tried to quiet him. "Maester Hollis says he is very healthy. He was turned in the womb. Hollis says that happens when babies are so large. Rob said your children did not require that." "Twins are smaller," she said, remembering the words Maester Lewin had told her, and Brindon was obviously small. "Joanna was my largest child, but even she was a few weeks early. I fear I would have shrieked having to deliver Ned." "I did," Jane admitted, a flush flooding her cheeks. "Maester Hollis tried to send Rob away because I was in so much pain, but he did not leave. He said he has always been there when his children enter the world. He has." As Ned's cries increased, Myrcella found herself extending her arms. "Might I try, Your Grace?" Jane easily handed over her son, and Myrcella felt a lump rise in her throat at the feel of a baby in her arms again. In the woods beyond Winterfell, in her dreams at the wall, she imagined holding another of Rob's children, of staring into a face which was so like his and showering kisses upon it. In none of those dreams had Jane Westerling existed. In none of those dreams had she considered what it would be like to hold a child from her husband's seed but not grown in her womb. "He cries constantly," Jane confessed, a touch of hysteria in her voice. "Mother says babies cry, but it only abates when he is being fed or sleeps, and his sleep comes so rarely. No one can seem to calm him for long. You should walk with him." Getting to her feet, walking the length of the bed while gently swaying her arms, she explained, "Stefan was the same. As long as he was in motion, he was quiet, but the moment I was still, he'd scream as if being flayed. Sometimes I would scream right along with him, and then old Nan would come and work her magic." "Really?" Myrcella nodded, bouncing Ned a bit more until he began to quiet. With Ricard, Rob could lay them upon his chest and he would happily lie there, quiet for hours. It took Rob weeks to realize Stefan would only quiet while he walked. "He used to walk all of Winterfell with Stefan in his arms so I could rest." "Was Lya like that?" She chuckled softly. "Oh, no, Lya was the quietest of them all. When Joanna would fuss, all I would have to do is put her in the cradle with Lya, and instantly she'd quiet. There is something peaceful about Lya." As Ned's eyes began to droop, Myrcella looked up from his face to see Jane had tears in her eyes. Before Myrcella could ask what was wrong, Jane blurted out, "I would have been a good wife and a good queen to him. I could have loved him as well as you if he had ever given me the chance." Guilt and shame walked for top billing in her body, especially with Jane's son heavy in her arms. "I do not doubt that. I know you love him." Wiping away a stray tear with the back of her hand, Jane sniffled, "He says he will arrange the very best marriage he can for me in the north, somewhere I can visit Ned. You know he means to take him back to Winterfell." Myrcella shook her head. "I did not. I may not be his wife much longer, but Ned is a Stark of Winterfell, the same as your sons. And I expect him to be treated as such." Her face suddenly fierce, Jane Westerling declared, "I would have raised your children as my own, loved them as well as I love Ned. You owe me that same kindness." If she was only Cersei Lannister's daughter, she would have spat, "I owe you nothing. You waited until my husband was broken, went to his bed, and tried to take what was rightfully mine. You should be thanking the seven I did not take your head upon my return." But the woman who had learned her lessons at Catelyn Stark's side swore, "Ned will never know a difference between the love I bear the children I birthed and the love I will bear for him." After her betrothal, Lady Catelyn once assured her that love could grow in any situation if those involved tried hard enough. Myrcella did not see why it would be different with Rob's child. Rob was behind her, inside her when the direwolves began to howl. The moon was full and high in the dark sky, a wolf moon Rob called it when he slipped beneath the firs, already nude and half-hard with desire. He had been in the Reach these past few weeks, trying to barter an alliance with Highgarden, and his return to Riverrun was anxiously awaited. Jane was still in the birthing bed, her strength never having returned, and the Westerlings were all becoming uneasy. Myrcella could scarcely pass Sybil Spicer without the woman looking ready to spit, and, when she found Myrcella reading to Jane one afternoon, she ordered Myrcella from the room. "Is it not enough you have turned my daughter into the king's whore, her child a byblow? Must you sit in her room and mock her with your presence? I do not wish harm upon Jane, Lady Westerling. I only wish her health to improve. Her health would improve if her husband did not spend his nights fucking you and plotting how to take her son away." Sybil's eyes darkened as she growled, "If you had an ounce of honor, you would have stepped aside." "I am so sorry I ruined your plans by not dying in the north," Myrcella replied, her words as icy as the wall, "but I will not have a woman who urged her daughters into the beds of Starks until one agreed to wed her lecture me on honor." She did not tell Robb of her latest fight with Sybil, not when he returned sore and drawn, not when he held Ned with nervous hands as Jane got weaker in her bed. No, she did what Lady Catelyn advised her to do long ago when the prospect of being Robb's wife still frightened her. She waited until he came and then she was simply there, willing to provide whatever it was he needed. It was only good fortune that what Robb needed tonight was her, all grasping hands and desperate kisses, breathless pleas to help him forget whispered against her ear. "Forget what?" she murmured even as she slipped free of her shift, his lips moist against every spare inch of flesh. "Everything but us." The wolf song increased, each howl longer, and Myrcella heard Robb grunt in exasperation before sliding his hands from her hips, pulling her up onto her knees. She shouted at the change in angle, her head dropping back to rest against his shoulder, and Robb kissed the side of her face. "I shall kill those wolves," he growled, his thrusts speeding up, an edge of impatience to his movements now. "No wolves," Myrcella panted, reaching back to bury her fingers in his thick curls. "Just us, remember." His laugh was airy as he nodded in agreement. "Just us." Myrcella was quaking from her orgasm when someone began to knock on her door. Robb, still draped over her back, his moans buried in the flesh of her shoulder, rolled off of her, dropping onto his back beside her as she slid down onto the mattress, her sweat-slicked skin sticking to the sheets. The knocking began again. Robb grabbed a pillow behind his head and threw it towards the door. "Unless Balerion the Black Dread is over the castle, leave." "As impressive as that would be, Your Grace," Theon called through the door, "I fear this may interest you more." Robb grabbed the discarded quilt, pulling it over their bodies before grunting, "Come in." Myrcella wondered if she should feel more embarrassed about Theon seeing her near nude, sweat still visible on her skin, her thighs still wet from both her and Robb's release. She could not imagine Catelyn Stark ever allowing anyone to see her so wanton, though, if Myrcella was honest, she could not imagine Catelyn and Eddard Stark ever doing the things she and Robb did together. To Theon's credit, he did not let his eyes linger upon her. Of course, if he had, Robb likely would have gelded him, so mayhaps Theon was not due credit. "An envoy from Dorne has arrived, Your Grace," Theon reported, "with several thousand men and a prisoner they wish to present to you." "A prisoner?" Robb echoed. "Who have they taken?" Theon's eyes finally landed upon Myrcella, his face twisting apologetically, before answering, "The Kingslayer." Chapter 6, The Kingslayer's Daughter. Chapter text. If she had not been told the man in the cell was Sir Jaime Lannister, Myrcella would not have believed it. The Lord Commander of the Kingsguard was tall, strong, and golden, the handsomest man in the Seven Kingdoms. His armor always shone without a scratch, his white cloak never sullied, and his face was as familiar to Myrcella as her own. As a child, when she and Tommen would draw pictures, Myrcella must have sketched her uncle's profile half 100 times, sometimes with Jaime sitting patiently to allow it. The strength of his jaw, the noble line of his nose, the furrow between his eyes when King Robert roared, "Kingslayer," were all carefully etched on the paper. Once she had drawn a picture of her mother, Jaime, Joffrey, Tommen, and herself at Casterly Rock. Jaime asked her if he could keep it when she was done, and Myrcella wondered if he still had it tucked away somewhere, the crudely drawn family portrait. She had only been to Casterly Rock once in her life. She was 7 then, already well schooled on courtesies, but Cersei kept insisting she remember that the Lannisters were kings in the Westerlands, more powerful than the king amongst the bannermen. Myrcella remembered looking at her father, fat, half-drunk, face obscured by his beard, and thinking it would not be difficult to be more powerful than Robert Baratheon. When she voiced that opinion, Cersei smiled and Jaime laughed. She was not sure why the court was going to Casterly Rock, But Joffrey said there was going to be a tourney, and Myrcella loved to watch the knights fight valiantly, loved the wreaths of flowers given to the Queen of Love and Beauty. They were stopped for the day at an inn in the Reach when Jaime found her watching Joffrey and a few of the boys sparring with blunt tourney swords. Jaime sat beside her on the small rock wall, silent for a moment as Tommen and Robert Arryn thrusted awkwardly at each other with their swords, Joffrey and one of the SWYFT boys crossing blades a touch more skillfully. Her uncle leaned close and queried, "Who do you think shall win?" SWYFT, Myrcella answered instantly. "He is better at his defenses, and Joff will tire from swinging so wildly." Jaime smiled in amusement before asking, "What should he do?" "Stop swinging his sword like a hammer and realize SWYFT favors the right." This time Jaime laughed. "You are very observant, princess." "That is because I am not allowed to do anything." Myrcella sighed in irritation. "It is not fair, uncle. I ride as well, Joffrey, but I have to ride in the litter. I asked mother if I could have sword practice like Tommen, and she told me that is not what ladies do. I never get to do anything fun. You are a princess, and princesses are meant for dancing, smiling, and being beautiful." "Being boring, you mean?" Twisting her skirts in her hands, Myrcella complained, "I wish I was a boy." "Now you sound like your mother. When we were your age, she said the exact same thing, that it wasn't fair I got to play with swords while she had to sew." Jaime kissed the top of her head. "I much prefer you as a girl. But girls don't get to do anything but get married and have babies. Why can I not have an adventure?" Jaime grasped her hand. "Come with me." He led her into a grove of trees nearby, the noises of the traveling court muted by the distance. Myrcella watched wide-eyed as Jaime drew his sword, the blade gleaming in the summer sun, the hilt as golden as the hair on both their heads. Walking behind her, Jaime brought the sword in front of her, helping her to wrap her small hands around the pommel. It was too heavy for her to keep upright on her own, Jaime's strong hands surrounding hers. "This must be our secret," he declared against her ear as he showed her how to swing it, moving their bodies and the sword in a slow dance against invisible enemies. "Your kingly father and queenly mother would have my head if they knew I let the princess hold my kingslaying sword, and your brothers would demand the same." "You are not going to let Joffrey and Tommen hold your sword?" she asked in surprise. She never got to do anything that was not shared with her brothers. "They will have their own swords someday. And you will appreciate this far more than they ever will." When the cries announcing dinner reached them, Jaime sheathed his sword, Myrcella trying not to let her disappointment at their play being over. As Jaime smiled, Myrcella felt overwhelmed with gratitude, jumping up and embracing him tightly as he easily held her aloft. She pressed several quick kisses to his smooth cheek, squeezing him tightly around the neck. "I love you, Uncle Jaime. And I, you, my special girl." There was no sword on his hip now, no vigor in his face. The dirty, scruffy man in the cell could have been anyone. At least until he opened his eyes and the Lannister green was visible, then Myrcella knew this was no jape, that it truly was Jaime behind the bars. Someone had struck him, one eye was shaded with a deep purple bruise, his forehead crusted with dried blood. Even in his cell, he was shackled at the wrists and ankles, too much of a threat and too valuable a prisoner for even the slightest chance of escape. He had spent the past 2 weeks in this dank, smelly cell, 2 weeks during which Myrcella had to plead before finally being allowed to see him. Robb insisted seeing Jaime in the cell would only upset her, a claim Theon and Jon both agreed with. Tristan Martell thought it unwise to let anyone see the Kingslayer, afraid of someone trying to free him for Lannister gold or kill him for the lives he had taken. It was only after one of the most vicious fights she and Robb had ever had that he agreed to letting her visit. Jaime's smile was wan but genuine as he looked upon her. "I am happy to hear the rumors of your death were greatly exaggerated, princess." Myrcella smiled as she sank to the cement floor outside his cell, uncaring of the dirt, wanting to be eye to eye with her uncle. "Oh, I was as really and truly dead as Roose Bolton believed. After all, I am only a woman. How could I have survived in the north?" When Joffrey ordered Winterfell to be taken, he gave explicit instructions that you were to be brought back to court. He hoped to take your head and place it upon a pike. After raping me, no doubt. Jaime did not argue the point. His rage was absolute. The night word reached court you had escaped into the Godswood with Stark men. He offered a heavy reward for any man who brought you his body, no matter how picked apart by animals it was. A warning to traitors, he said it would be. Jaime snickered. When rumors reached court that you had survived by reaching the wall and that you had returned to the young wolf, Joffrey was wroth. It was quite amusing. Myrcella smiled at the idea of her brother's impotent rage. I am sad I did not get to witness that. It was a great show. I am certain the court was disappointed not to be able to see my head upon the wall. Jaime's face sobered. Your mother wept the night word reached us of your death. I have never seen her so upset. My mother has never cared an ounce for me, and I am sure her sadness came only because now Joffrey would be denied his precious heir. Myrcella snapped, her bitterness thick in her voice. He shook his head, dirty hair and bushy beard moving messily. The day you were born, Cersei said to me, oh, it is so sad she is a girl. Robert will trade her away like a horse, alliances built on the promise of her cunt. She tried to make a match for you in Lannisport so you could stay close. I did not want to stay close. Jaime's face darkened. No, you couldn't, not with Joffrey sneaking into your chamber. You needed to be as far away as you could be before he ruined you. Robert was going to marry you off to Doran Martell's youngest to get Dorne to heal. Myrcella shook her head. No, he said he chose Robb because houses Stark and Baratheon. Ah, yes, the great love story of Robert and Lyanna to live on in you and Robb Stark. Jaime interrupted, mockery heavy in his voice. It took so little to convince him how fitting it would be to wed his daughter to Ned Stark's son. The North has held and won thrones for centuries, Your Grace, I said to him. Why, it would be the joining of houses meant to be joined before Rhaegar ruined everything. He laughed mirthlessly. Only time the fat bastard ever listened to a word I said. Myrcella shivered beneath her cloak. You sent me north. Oh, Robert thought it was all his idea, and that was for the better. Cersei would have gutted me with my own sword if she knew I had a hand in it. Why did you bother? You hated Lord Stark. I did. Jaime easily agreed. Ned Stark was cold, unmovable, and too honorable for his own good, but a cruel man, he was not. Everyone knew he doted on that wife of his, and it was a fair enough guess his sons would be the same. And that's what you wanted, for me to be doted upon. I wanted you safe. Closing his eyes, resting his head against the cold wall, he flatly stated, I have committed many sins in my life, but I would not listen as another king raped his sister. You actually loving him was just a pleasant coincidence. Are you my father? Myrcella blurted out, needing to hear the truth from his lips. Jaime scoffed. King Robert Baratheon was your father. That is what the history books will say. Jaime. Leave me, he ordered, turning his head towards the small, high window of his cell. Dungeons are no place for princesses. Robb and his council were waiting for her when she emerged from the cells, all of the men solemn-faced, Tristan Martell grasping the hilt of his sword as if he expected Jaime to be at her back. He could have been my husband, Myrcella thought as the men eyed her with suspicion in her eyes. I would have been Princess Myrcella of Dorne and never have even known Robb if Jaime had not played Robert. Did he say anything worthwhile? Tristan asked, and Myrcella barely managed to keep from rolling her eyes at the false sense of importance in his voice. Like what, my lord? Did he tell me the exact battle plans of King Joffrey and agree to help our cause? The Dornishman blushed as Theon snickered. What is the point of you talking to the prisoner if it is not to help? Before Robb could respond, she snapped, because the prisoner is my uncle, whose well-being concerns me. If someone held Prince Oberyn, would you not inquire to his health? Oberyn Martell is not a kingslayer or a, he broke off, catching whatever accusation he was about to lobby. She knew instantly what Tristan was going to say. Or what, Prince Tristan? A sister fucker. Myrcella heard the men gasp before Robb stepped between her and the Dornish prince, his hands firm but not unkind upon her shoulders. Mayhaps you should join Lady Roslyn in her solar. If the circumstances were different, Myrcella might have argued, but she did not trust her temper in that moment. If a sword had been in her hand, she would run Tristan Martell clean through, once for herself and once for her uncle. No one at Riverrun called Jaime by his name, it was always Kingslayer, a title which did nothing to say who he was and yet Myrcella knew had come to define him. Robert had never used his name either, it was always Kingslayer or your brother when speaking to Cersei. Myrcella did not remember when she learned what it meant or when her septa taught her the history of her family. It was something which seemed to be inherently known. Robert Baratheon slew Prince Rhaegar on the Trident, Sir Jaime slew King Aerys, and then the Targaryen dynasty was done. But knowing Jaime was the Kingslayer and understanding what it truly meant were two different things. And, even as a child, Myrcella could see the suppressed flinch every time someone used the term, the way Jaime seemed to twist from it when standing still. "Why did you kill the Mad King?" she asked him one afternoon as he escorted her to lessons with her septa. "Because he was mad, sweeterling," he replied easily, the sun reflecting brightly off of his armor. "No, I understand that, but why was it you? Why didn't Sir Barristan or another one of the Kingsguard do it?" Stopping in the hallway, staring up at him earnestly, she asked, "If King Aerys was so mad, why did only you stop him?" Jaime froze for a moment before bending down to meet her eye. One finger lifting her chin when she dropped her gaze, afraid she was in trouble, he said, "You are very smart, princess. You do not miss a thing, do you?" Unsure how to answer, she offered, "I did not mean to displease you." His smile was sweetly sad. "You have not displeased me. None of the other Kingsguard killed the Mad King because our duty is to protect the king. We guard and we watch, but we do not judge. I killed the Mad King because I wanted to make the realm safe for sweet, little girls like you, and the realm will always hate me for it." Myrcella remembered being so confused. "But you saved the realm. You are a hero." No matter how honorable his intentions, an oathbreaker can never be a hero. Rising tall again, he added, "But that is fine because I do not much care for heroics. Heroes get fat and drunk and soon they do not look anything like the heroes everyone remembers. Like father." Jaime's laughter echoed off the walls. "Precisely, my special girl." As Myrcella tossed and turned in her bed that night, she wondered what Jaime Lannister had been like before murdering King Aerys, what Cersei had been like. Her mother never spoke of life before Robert's rebellion and, when she was small, Myrcella used to wonder if the world had not really begun until Robert Baratheon took the throne. "What's wrong?" Robb sleepily murmured, one heavy arm falling over her body, pulling her close. Normally it was enough to calm her, to settle into his embrace and forget, but tonight Myrcella could not still. "Do you ever wonder what it was like before the rebellion?" "Sometimes. The Baratheons and Starks ended up heroes, and the Lannisters were villains." "Why do you think that was?" She heard practically hear Robb trying to think of a kinder truth before he finally admitted, "Because the Lannisters did not kill their enemies in battle, they killed them by betrayal. When Tommen and I were still very small, we found kittens in the yard. Tommen's was orange and mine was black. We carried them into the keep, and my mother screamed at Sir Meryn to take them away." "Do you know why?" Robb nodded at her back. "Princess Rhaenys had a black kitten called Balerion. My grandfather ordered Rhaegar's wife and children murdered, my father killed the prince, and my uncle, the king. My mother wed Robert and apparently cuckolded him with her own twin. Joffrey, gods, I do not even know how to describe him. That is my blood, Robb. That is the blood I passed our children." Sitting up, pulling out of his arms, Myrcella wiped in frustration at her straight hairs. "My blood is bad and—" "No." Robb cut in, sleep gone from his eyes as he rose, turning her head so she was looking at him. "You are sweet and kind and good, just as our children are. You do not understand." Climbing from bed, haphazardly wrapping her robe around her body, she said, "The things I think, the words I choke back. Thoughts are not actions, Myrcella. Do you think every thought I have is kind? Do you think I do not imagine choking Theon within an inch of his life every time I catch him staring down the front of your gun?" Despite her conflicting emotions, she could not help but smile. "I did not realize you noticed that. Any time a man's eyes are on you, I notice, and I promise you that there is nothing but violence in those thoughts." Robb reached out, clasping her hand and tugging back towards the bed. "You are human, my love, just like the rest of us. Your blood is no worse than mine. How can you say that? My mother, my father." Robb rose to his knees, cupping her face firmly between his palms. "Your mother is Cersei Lannister, and your father was King Robert Baratheon. You were Princess Myrcella Baratheon until I put a cloak upon your shoulders in the Godswood 7 years past. You are Myrcella of House Stark, and that is all that matters. She went willingly back into bed, back into his arms. Myrcella rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady thudding of his heart as his fingers carded through her hair. If seeing the Kingslayer bothers you so, it may be better if you do not visit him. Jaime, she corrected. What? His name is Jaime. Rob repeated the name, the syllables sounding odd on his tongue, but Myrcella loved him for saying her uncle's true name. And I must visit him. Why? Because he would visit me. Because he is my father. When she told the young guard to open Jaime's cell, she could see the man did not know what to do. She knew from the sigil on his clothing he was a Westerling man, and Lady Sybil frequently corrected anyone who dared follow Myrcella's instructions over Jane's. When coupled with the insistence of Dawn that Jaime's cell never be opened at risk of escape, she knew the boy did not know whether to disobey Myrcella or Lady Westerling. She held up the basin of water and rag she carried. I only wish to clean him, sir, and he is chained to the floor. Smiling playfully, she added, I give you my guarantee he is only a man and cannot break chains. Though if I could, Jaime piped up with a mischievous grin. The boy's hand shook as he unlocked the cell, one hand firmly on his sword. When Jaime rattled his chains, the boy jumped, and Myrcella glared at her uncle, who only chuckled. Setting the basin on the floor, she said to the guard, I do not require supervision. You may wait outside. Prin, you're my lady, he sputtered. No punishment will come to you, she assured him, but I do require privacy. You may go. When he hesitated, Myrcella hardened her voice and stated, I do not like to repeat myself, sir. The moment Myrcella heard the heavy slide of the dungeon's door closing, she dipped the rag in the warm water and wrung it out, Jaime watching her with laughter dancing in his eyes. Carefully she began to scrub his filthy face, his skin as pink as Tommen's beneath the dirt. You have a gentler touch than your mother, he commented as she rinsed the rag and began again. As a queen, or in the literal sense? Jaime grinned, brow furrowing for a moment as she began to wash away the dried blood. Both, I suppose. Though your mother was not nearly so insolent when her husband gave an order. My husband likes me insolent, it was the blind obedience he broke out of me. Leaning closer, carefully trying to clean the cut, she added, and I do not take orders. Even from your king. From any king. Running the rag over his beard, she commented, is that what Robert used to try to beat from my mother, her insolence? Jaime's eyes flashed in anger. Robert used to beat your mother because she was not Lyanna Stark, because she was smarter than him, because the sun rose in the east and set in the west. Robert hit Cersei because it made him feel more a man to do so. And yet you did not slay him. An oversight nature rectified for me. She moved the rag down to his neck, having to use more strength to remove the thickly crusted filth. You wanted Joffrey on the throne that badly. The only throne Joffrey is fit to sit is a privy, Jaime retorted, moving his head to help the process along. If the world was just, Tommen would have come first or you would have been a son, but the world is not just. Your mother believed with enough counsel, Joffrey could make a passably suitable king and Margaery Tyrell would give him heirs aplenty. Always growing, my ass. Mayhaps that proves the world is just. Moving the rag down to his arms, she asked, how is Tommen? A genuine smile stretched across his face. Tommen is Tommen. His wife is swelling, due any day now. Tyrion is with him at the Rock, and he says all the people love Tommen dearly. He still harbors dreams of being a grand tourney knight, but he is useless during a tilt. He wants to be you, he always has. He is far too sweet to ever be me, he mildly replied. Inhaling sharply as she began to gently wash his abridged wrists, he asked, did you ever wish to be like Cersei? I wanted to be beautiful like her. When I was small, I thought there was no woman more beautiful than she was. Myrcella shook her head, re-wetting the rag to work on his other wrist. But there is nothing. When Robert would reach for her, she'd pull away. When Tommen or I would run to her, she'd chastise us for messing her gun. I never wished to be like that. Our mother died when we were young. Cersei did not know. Do you defend her because she is your twin or because you love her? Myrcella cut in, her temper flaring. What would it take for you to see her clearly? An interesting question to ask when Jane Westerling and her son are upstairs. His face hardening, he declared, it is easy to love a perfect person. But who is perfect? Throwing the rag into the basin, Myrcella sighed, sitting back on her heels. Did you take the white cloak so you would never have to marry? I took the white cloak because it was an honor. Jamie smiled wryly. I believed in it. What do you believe in now? Today I believe in kindness, but it may very well change tomorrow. Lifting his shackled hands, he managed to chuck her under the chin. Those whose beliefs never change are the sorts of people you should never trust. Are you my father? Jamie settled back against the wall, jingling his chains. The father of a queen would never be in fetters. Placing the rag in the basin, Myrcella rose, carefully balancing it in her hands. I will be back tomorrow. I will be here. John found her in the godswood, his heavy black cloak tight around his body, his hood remained down, and his hair was practically white with snow, Ghost padding silently beside his horse. He shook his head with a soft laugh. They say the snow is going to be 6 feet high, and you decide to come pray. It is not as cold or as high as the snow at the wall, Myrcella countered, nor was it snowing when I first came here. John extended his hand, easily lifting her onto his horse. Myrcella hugged his middle, settling against his broad back, and she could still smell the scents of the wall in his cloak. Do you ever miss it? John did not ask for clarification. In their months together, they had developed a shorthand which carried over to Riverrun. Arya teased her about being jealous, John having always been her favorite brother, but Myrcella was grateful for it. She had never known anyone as easy to talk to as Jon Snow. Sometimes. They were my brothers for nearly half my life. It has been an adjustment. Myrcella nodded in understanding, certain he could feel the movement against his back. After a beat, she asked, do you ever wish Lord Stark had told you the truth of your parentage before he died? John was quiet for so long, Myrcella suspected her words had been carried off by the wind. And finally he said, I wish for many things, most of all the truth. If Lyanna Stark was my mother and Rhaegar Targaryen, my father, then everything I know is false. I would like to believe that my entire life was not a lie. Mayhaps he was just trying to protect you, especially after what happened to Princess Rhaenys and Prince Aegon. I do not feel there can ever be true protection with lies. The words were so much something which would have come from Eddard Stark's mouth, Myrcella could not help but chuckle. Your morality is certainly more Stark than Targaryen. When they reached the yard, Jon slid from the saddle, helping her down as well. As Myrcella shook her snow from her hair, Jon caught her wrist loosely in his hand, his face serious as ever. I do not believe our blood is what makes us who we are. I believe we always have a choice. And what if there is no good choice? Jon pushed a lock of her hair away from her forehead, pressing a warm kiss there. Then you do what I do, you ask yourself what Eddard Stark would have done. Jane Westerling died in the middle of the night, 3 days into the great snowstorm which had crippled the Riverlands, 4 months after giving birth to little Ned. Maester Hollis said it was the birthing fever, but Lady Sybil insisted it was a broken heart. Myrcella heard Sybil shriek her sorrow half the castle away, high and mournful, and, though Myrcella hated Sybil Spicer ferociously, she did not wish the death of a child on anyone. When the older woman saw Myrcella in the dining hall the next morning, Myrcella knew she would say something, so pale and drawn from grief. She knew the servants and Maester Hollis were preparing Jane for rest in the Tully crypt until the snow stopped so her bones could be taken back to the crag, but Myrcella had not expected her to join them to break fast. The wine hit Myrcella squarely in the face a half-second before Sybil's words began to register. Lannister whore. You killed her. You killed her as surely as if you had run her through with a sword. You fucking whore. Lord Westerling wrapped his wife in a firm grip, pulling her from the table as his sons hurried to help. Myrcella did not move for a moment, so acutely humiliated and guilt-ridden she could hardly breathe, but she felt Theon at her shoulder, knew Arya had already run to find Robb. Shaking off her friend's hand, Myrcella wiped at the wine on her face, vaguely recognizing her gown was ruined, before moving towards her rooms. She would not cry in front of Robb's men, would not let them know how Sybil Spicer's words affected her. Myrcella did not consciously choose to go to the dungeons rather than her apartments. One moment she was ready to ascend the stairs and the next she was having the boy let her into Jaime's cell. He was wrapped in a heavy fur, the cell colder than usual, and a bowl of oaten meal sat beside him. His eyebrows rose at the sight of her wine-stained gown and drawled, "It is a bit early to be getting drunk, is it not?" She sat on the cold stone, numbness settling in her limbs. Jane Westerling is dead. Jaime inclined his head. Then long live the Queen. Don't, she snapped, rage licking at her. Do not joke about this. I did not want her to die. Then you should not have started a war, he replied, maddeningly calm. People die in wars, Myrcella, some by the sword and others by chance. You may have not wanted Jane Westerling to die any more than you wished for Eddard Stark or his son to die, but they died. Unless your blade was the one who cut them down, you light a candle to the stranger and move on. How can you be so cold? She has a baby who will never know his mother. Yes, as Tyrion never knew our mother, as your good brother's bastard will never her father, and hundreds more have never known theirs. Daenerys Targaryen knew neither her mother nor her father, and yet she survived. Valar Morghulis. Myrcella's bow wrinkled for a moment as she tried to remember the High Valyrian her scepter once tried to teach her. All men must die, he translated. You cannot have the living without the dying. Dropping her gaze, trying to hide the welling of tears in her eyes, she murmured, Lady Sybil says she died of a broken heart. She called me a whore. Jaime moved as suddenly as he was able, jerking hard on her skirt to get her to look at him. His face as fierce as it was during Tony's, he gritted out, Robb Stark made vows to that girl, not you. Robb Stark broke his vows to you. Robb Stark put a child in her belly, not you. If Sybil Spicer wants to lay that girl's body at anyone's feet, it should be his. Hot tears coursing down her cheeks, she repeated, I did not want her to die. Face softening, Jaime sighed, of course you didn't, sweeterling. You are too good for that. It was Robb who found her in Jaime's cell, sitting silently in the freezing room. His face somber, jaw tightly clenched, Robb extended his hand to help her to her feet. Myrcella accepted the hand, pointedly avoiding the questioning expression on his face. Jaime watched, his green eyes following their movements with a peculiar smile on his face, and Myrcella could see it unnerved Robb. Something amusing, Kingslayer. A great number of things, Your Grace. Shall I list them all for you? Robb stepped forward, his hand rising to strike, but Myrcella pressed her hands against his chest, stilling him in his tracks. She firmly shoved, urging him out of Jaime's cell, noisily slamming the door shut. Jaime's smile did not falter as Myrcella led Robb from the cells, and she wondered what her uncle was thinking. When she asked him 2 days later, Jaime's smile returned. I was thinking if Cersei had trained Robert half so well, how different the world would be. Are you my father? His smile became wry. How could I be your father when your mother is my sweet sister? Robb frequently asked her how she could stand to talk to him, to sit in his cell as she once sat in the Red Keep and discuss any topic of her choosing. Myrcella tried to explain, but she knew she did not have the words and that, when she did, if she offered them, he would not understand how deeply she loved Sir Jaime Lannister. He saved me, she almost said one night. He was the only one who saw what Joffrey did to me, the only one who put a stop to it. The other knights knew, and they did not stop him because one day he would be king. They were afraid of him even as a child because our mother would take Joffrey's word as sacred. But Jaime heard me crying that day and he marched in, strong and tall, and he literally threw Joffrey off of me. And when Joffrey told him he could not do that because he was going to be king someday, Jaime looked him straight in the eye and said, yes, and I am the Kingslayer, and your throat will open as easily as Aes did. But Myrcella did not share that story because then she would have to tell the rest, and no one knew what happened that day after Jaime carried her out of her bedchamber. And while Robb loved her dearly, she knew he would never be able to see past the legend of the Kingslayer. She still remembered how badly she shook as Jaime held her, holding her tightly against him. At first she thought he was taking her to her mother, to tell the Queen what he witnessed, and Myrcella wondered if Joffrey would be sent away. But he didn't move towards the Queen's apartments, instead he took her to the White Tower, to his own apartment, one of the few places in the castle she had never been. It was neatly kept with a large, soft bed, a Lannister tapestry on the wall, and Myrcella thought the lion on it looked to be crying rather than a roaring. Arms up, sweeterling, he said when he returned to the bed, one of his shirts in his hand. Myrcella did not realize her gown was torn and mostly unlaced until she let Jaime help her out of it, and she thought how angry her mother would be because it was brand new, a name-day gift from Tywin. Jaime hissed when she was only in her small clothes, and Myrcella saw the dappling of blood on her thighs, Lannister crimson against her pale skin. She wanted to tell Jaime it was fine, that Joff had made her bleed before and it seldom hurt for long, but she didn't. Instead she watched as he wet a rag and carefully cleaned her skin, his touch whisper soft. His shirt was much too large on her, but Myrcella liked the way it smelled of him. When he bundled her beneath his quilts, he tickled her lightly on the ribs, and she giggled. Jaime took one of her hands in his before he asked, "Has Joffrey hurt you before, sweeterling?" Myrcella nodded shyly. "How many times?" She shrugged. "A lot lately. Not so much before." "Is it always like today?" "No, sometimes he makes me touch him." Jaime brushed her hair away from her face, smiling kindly. "He is never going to hurt you again, my love. And if he tries, he will swiftly regret it." Kissing the tip of her nose, drawing another giggle from her lips, he said, "Now you are going to rest up here until I get you a fresh gown. And when I come back, I am going to tell you the most wonderful story you have ever heard." "Uncle Jaime," she ventured when he was about to open his chamber door. "Yes, my love. Joffrey says I have to do what he says because he's going to be the king. And he said he will hurt Tommen if I tell anyone what he does. I do not want him to hurt Tommen." Jaime returned to the bed, taking both of her hands in his. "No harm will come to Tommen. And the only man who should touch you that way is your husband, not your brother, whether he is the king or not." "He is mad," she whispered. Myrcella remembered the way he lowered his eyes, the way he squeezed her hands so tightly. When he returned to the tower, he brought her favorite blue gown and some spun sugar. As she snacked on her treat, Jaime said, "Guess what, my special girl? We are going north." Robb would be grateful for what Jaime had done for her, but he would see it as a kind act performed by an unkind man. Myrcella would never be able to get him to see that the handful of unkind acts had been performed by a kind man. Robb could not understand that. No Stark had ever needed to be saved from another Stark. "I was talking to one of the guards earlier," Jaime remarked as Myrcella cleaned the abrasions on his wrists, "and he said you spar in the yard with a sword against your husband's men." "When the snow is not higher than my head, yes," she confirmed, carefully applying a linen bandage around his raw skin. "And your husband approves." At first it amused him. And then he thought it was admirable. Now he japes, "I am better than half of his men, and he should slap armor upon me. I would like to see that." "As you should, for I am very good." Moving to his other wrist, exchanging smiles with him, she added, "I have your sword, you know. Tristan Martell gave it me when I asked." Demanded, Jaime corrected with a smirk. "Asked for it. I assume you would prefer it in my custody than in the Dornish prince's." "It makes no matter, for I shall never hold it again." Myrcella frowned. "What do you mean?" Jaime chuckled mirthlessly. "Oh, my girl, you are too sweet for this world. I am no hostage, your husband will not sell me back to the Iron Throne, and, even if he wanted, Dorne would never allow it. I am the bait in the trap. For Joffrey. For the Dragon Queen. What better way to lure Her Highness off of Dragonstone than with the Kingslayer, the man who put to sword her family's 300-year dynasty?" Jaime shrugged. "There is a bit of poetry to it, I suppose. The Kingslayer slain by the child no one thought would survive her birth, let alone survive in Essos with no protection but her equally mad brother. We all underestimated Daenerys Targaryen. Of course," he allowed, "that could also be said for you, Asha Greyjoy, and Arianne Martell." The hint of a smile twitched at the corners of his lips. Tywin was so busy watching the brothers, he forgot about the sisters. Myrcella began to shake her head, certain she was misunderstanding his words. "You cannot, she will kill you." "Yes," Jaime mildly confirmed. "That is what happens to men who slay kings. Why do you think your grandfather ordered Rhaegar's children to be put to death? Children become adults, adults who want justice for the wrongs committed against their families. But Aerys Targaryen was mad. Really and truly. He was prepared to loose wildfire through all of King's Landing, leave Robert nothing but soot and ash to rule, and I saved those lives. But it does not matter because the life which was important was the king's and that I took." A peculiar expression descending over his face, he stated, "This is no worse than I deserve." "You do not deserve this." Myrcella insisted. Jamie looked away, his eyes fixed on the window. After a moment, he said, Queen Rollo was one of my mother's dearest friends, and I did nothing to stop Aerys from raping her. I respected Prince Roriger, and I spoke not a word to defend him when Robert would drunkenly declare him the vilest man in the Seven Kingdoms. I guarded Princess Elia and did not argue with my father when he said that what Gregor Clegane did was necessary. I used to sneak Princess Rhaenys sweets after Aerys would rage, and I stared upon her body after she was murdered without making a sound. Turning his gaze back upon Myrcella, self-loathing in his eyes, he pronounced, Daenerys Targaryen deserves my head, for if she and her brother had not been spirited off to Essos, I would have been sent to end her life as well. Myrcella tried to blink through her tears, heartbreaking. But you would not have killed children. Your mother was the queen then, Myrcella. I would have killed every last person in the world if it meant Cersei would be safe. She pushed to her feet, thoughts racing wildly. Desperation in her voice, she exclaimed, why can you not say no to her? Why can you not break away? Why could you not hate the young wolf for Jane Westerling? Why will you raise her son when he will be a constant reminder of that pain? Jamie countered. Because I love him, she silently answered. Because he is the father of my children and the only man I have ever loved. Because I do not feel complete when I am not with him. Are you my father? Jamie scoffed. If I was, I'm a piss-poor one, am I not? Little Ned cried constantly since Jane's death. Before departing Riverrun with Jason Mallister, their ship destined for Pentos until the war was over, Sybil had attempted to take the baby with her, insisting that he would be better with his family. When Robb protested, stating he would not have his son in another country, that Ned was already with family, Sybil declared she would not have Jane's child raised by a Lannister whore. I have never seen him so angry, Arya confessed to Myrcella later as they ate supper. I thought he would behead her right then and there. But Sybil was still Jane's mother, and Robb knew how well Jane loved them. Instead he let the Westerlings go, only the wet nurse left to care for Ned. Myrcella thought she would feel better with the Westerlings gone, but Ned's cries seldom quieted, a wailing reminder of what had been lost. She knew it unnerved Robb, but, since Jane's death, he could barely bring himself to look at his son, guilt painted on his face. It was as if Jane's absence was louder than her presence, and Ned's screams echoed in her wake. Myrcella did not consciously decide to go to Ned that day. The wet nurse, Greta, she reminded herself was only a few years older than Myrcella, but she looked to be older, her breasts were massive, even buried beneath yards of fabric, and she was not particularly pretty. There were whispers Theon had bedded her, there were always whispers Theon had bedded someone, but Myrcella did not know much about the nurse except she was rapidly losing her patience. I am sorry, Your Grace Great sputtered upon seeing Myrcella, Ned shrieking so loudly it made Myrcella's ears ache, his face as red as his hair. He has been fed, but he is just. Give him to me, Myrcella requested, extending her arms. Greta hesitated only a moment before handing over the infant, gratitude flashing briefly on the woman's weathered face, before slipping back into a practiced look of deference. Ned did not quiet in Myrcella's arms, but Myrcella had not expected him to. She knew it was uncertainty more than anything which made Ned scream. I will tend to Ned for now. You should get something to eat and rest. Bouncing Ned in her arms, she added, but I would ask you have the servants fill a bath for me in my apartments, but make sure the water is not too hot. Yes, Your Grace. Greta instantly agreed, dropping into a curtsy before hurrying from the nursery. Ned continued to fuss as the servants filled the tub with water, as Myrcella wrestled him from his wool clothing. When the servants were gone, Myrcella shed her gown, holding a whining Ned close to her breast before carefully stepping into the tub. The water was nowhere near as hot as Myrcella liked it to be, but this bath was not for her. As the water touched Ned's skin, he started, beginning to whimper, before Myrcella grasped him beneath his arms and began to move him slowly and evenly through the water. Ned quieted as she pushed him back and forth, the water gently lapping at his skin. After a moment, the ever-present redness of his skin disappeared, his tears drying on his face. When he giggled, Myrcella found herself laughing as well. Oh, you like this, don't you? Your big brother Stefan used to like this as well. Old Nan said babies always love water because they swim in their mother's wombs. Smiling as Ned's little hand slapped the water, she laughed. You shall be a great swimmer, won't you? I can already tell. When we return to Winterfell, we will take you to the hot springs, and we shall teach you as we taught Stefan and Ricard. You can learn with Brynden and your sisters. She was not sure how long they had been in the bath when Robb entered her chambers, freezing in place at the sight of her lifting and lowering Ned into the water, his laughter unbearably sweet. Myrcella smiled at Robb, bidding him closer, and he slowly approached, bending beside the tub. You got him to stop crying, he said, a touch of awe in his voice. Old Nan used to put Stefan in the bath when he'd get too fussy. I thought it might help. Noticing the shuttered expression on his face, she ventured, I did not mean to overstep. No, it's fine, he quickly assured her, reaching out to run a finger along the soft skin of Ned's arm. I just did not expect. I swore to Jane I would treat Ned as if he was my child, and I would not let my child cry. Her eyes meeting Robb's, her voice thick with emotion, she stated, should you ever bring another child into our marriage, I will not be so kind. Robb leaned forward, kissing her temple. The only children in our future will be our own. She held Ned to her breast that night, his body soft and warm against hers, his heart beat fast as a hummingbird's wings, and Myrcella thought of Jane Westerling, the queen who would be forgotten, the wife whose name would only be said in whispers when telling a scandalous story about the king. One day Ned would hear the stories too, would learn he was no more Myrcella's blood than Lyass Snow, and Myrcella wondered what he would think of her then, the only mother he would ever know. Would he hate her then? Would she become the villain? Would he look at her with the same distasteful look Myrcella used when looking upon Cersei Lannister? But Ned was soft and sweet, his little head resting over her heart, and the future was far away for now. Myrcella brought Jaime his supper one evening, preparing a tray of actual food rather than the customary scraps. She could practically see the saliva on Jaime's lips at the scent of food, his breathing having noticeably increased, and, as he tore into the capon with white teeth, his beard and hair so shaggy, he had never looked more like a lion. Do my captors know you are feeding me so well? He asked between bites, not bothering to even feign manners as he shoveled the food into his mouth. A man should have a real meal on his name day. Jaime paused for a moment, surprise registering in his eyes. I did not realize I had been here so long. She nodded, sinking down to the floor. Myrcella could tell by the look on his face he was thinking of Cersei. At court when she was small, there were always grand name day celebrations for her parents, and always her mother would give a slice of her special cake to Jaime, who always sneaked her and Tommen bites while Joffrey was given his own piece. Then your name day is next week. Again she nodded, plucking a candied almond from his dish before popping it into her mouth. It was disgustingly hot the day you were born, Jaime revealed as he began to take bites of the vegetables. You couldn't do anything without being covered in sweat, and your mother spent the last month of her pregnancy in ice baths trying to get comfortable, which she never could. By our name day, she said she was going to tear open her stomach just to force you out. Taking a swallow his honeyed wine, he continued, Robert was in Storm's End when her labor began. With Joffrey, she had been nearly silent, clenching her jaw to keep from shouting, but she screamed with you. I thought she would die in the bed. No wonder she was never fond of me, Myrcella quipped. Jaime smiled. Maester Pycelle literally pulled you from Cersei's body, all flailing limbs and covered in blood. Neither of us even saw you at first because Cersei was bleeding so badly, you did not make a sound, and we both thought you were born dead. And then Pycelle said, the little princess is a peaceful thing and gave you over to Cersei, who only wanted sons. Myrcella finished. She told me 100 times she was not meant to be the mother of daughters. When I was 5, a woman at court had a son she called Tytos, and mother told me that was to have been my name. She was so convinced you were a son, she did not choose a girl's name. When the raven was sent to Robert, he said he did not care. You had no name for 3 days and, on the 4th, when I told her it was bad luck for a child to have no name, she said, then you name her. And so I did. Why did you choose Myrcella? It was what our mother meant to call Tyrion if he had been a girl. Draining his glass, Jaime gestured for the wineskin in Myrcella's hand. After it was refilled, he said, no one heard you speak until you were 3. Cersei and Robert both worried you were mute or slow-witted, but Maester Pycelle insisted you were simply shy, that there was nothing physically wrong with you. And then, one day, I was standing guard while your parents, Tyrion, Tywin, and a few others ate. You and Joffrey were there, silent and compliant, the perfect little prince and princess. When Cersei dismissed you, Joffrey went with the Hound and Arisocurt was to take you upstairs. But when your mother called for Aris, you said, clear as a bell, no, Jaime please. Myrcella chuckled. I am sure my mother loved that. Everyone was so surprised, no one said anything at first. Then Robert started to laugh, Tyrion made a jape, and soon everyone forgot your silence. Did you take me to my room? Jaime shook his head. Robert wanted me close that night so I could hear when he fucked his serving girls. Taking a sip from the wineskin, Myrcella asked, are you my father? I have been a member of the Kingsguard since I was but 15, and everyone knows we are forbidden to have wives or children. Draining his glass for the second time, he snapped, and why do you ask me that every time you come? Because all I ever wished was for you to be my father. Pushing to her feet, ignoring the anguished look on his face, she mused, I should have known better than to think the silly wishes of a scared, little girl could ever come true. She did not visit him again until the raven arrived from Arianne Martell announcing Daenerys Targaryen was coming to Riverrun. Once, when she was 6, her uncle Renly told her stories about dragons. She had been sick in bed for almost a week with a fever, and Cersei insisted she not be allowed around Joffrey or Tommen at risk of getting them sick as well. It was not until she was older Myrcella realized the true reason her mother did not want to risk her sons falling ill was because they were more valuable than Myrcella was. But Renly came to her bedchamber, sparkling eyes and wide smile, and Myrcella giggled when he gave her a clutch of sweet-smelling flowers. Renly was only 8 and 10 then, already handsome and beloved at court, and her father loudly lamented the potential brides Renly turned away. She remembered feeling flattered Renly came to visit her, having eschewed one of his brother's hunting trips to remain at the castle, and she liked hearing the tales he told, using her dolls as props. When Renly went to leave, he leaned forward to press a kiss to her hair, and Myrcella jerked away, remembering her mother's words when she requested a hug. You cannot touch me or you will get sick too. Renly smirked and leaned forward, dropping his voice to whisper. I will have you know that your sickness is not deadly, sweeterling. Why, Sir Loras was abed with it, and he is well as can be now. His lips were firm against her head. I shall take my chances. But even though Myrcella told Grand Maester Pycelle what Renly said, he still insisted she remain in bed for another week, and Myrcella was really and truly miserable. When Jaime came to check in on her a few days later, bringing her a bowl of iced cream to soothe her burning throat, she begged, will you tell me stories about dragons? Dragons, he laughed. Wouldn't you prefer a happier story, like Florian and Jonquil? Myrcella shook her head, greedily devouring her treat. Uncle Renly told me stories about Balerion and Meraxes and how Aegon and his sisters rode them. I want to hear those stories. What if I showed you a dragon, he offered instead. But all the dragons are dead. Yes, but I know a place where the bones of the dragons are. Would you like to see them? But Maester Pycelle said I cannot leave my room. Jaime rolled his eyes, taking her bowl of cream and scooping her into his arms. She wore only her nightdress, her hair a hopeless tangle, but Jaime did not insist on her dressing or even putting on slippers. I am a knight of the Kingsguard, my special girl, and, if old Pycelle says a word, I shall draw my sword to defend your honor. Myrcella giggled against his neck as he carried her through the castle. When they began to descend into the cellars of the Red Keep, Myrcella shivered, frightened. Joffrey tried to bring her down into the cellars once, saying he wanted to show her something, but Lord Varys found them and hurried them upstairs. She tightened her grasp on Jaime as they went further below ground, watching as Jaime removed a torch from the wall to light their way. They loomed in the darkness, the skulls of 19 dragons, some as small as a dog, others so large Jaime could stand tall in their massive jaws. Myrcella gasped as Jaime brought her to the largest skull, encouraging her to touch the bone. She was not sure if it was her imagination or not, but the bone felt warm as a bath. This was Balerion the Black Dread, Jaime informed her, his voice soft with an edge of play to it. He was the largest and fiercest of all the Targaryen dragons, and Aegon the Conqueror rode him as if he was nothing more than a pony. His sisters, Rhaenys and Visenya, rode theirs just the same, and the only time they all ever filled the sky was during the Field of Fire. They say Balerion lived to be 200 years old, but only Aegon was ever bold enough to mount him. Why did all the dragons die? No one knows for sure, though the Maesters all have ideas. But most believe that dragons are born of magic and that, When the magic began to leave the world, so did the dragons. Mother says magic was never real, that it just exists in songs and stories. Well, do not tell your mother I said this, but she does not know everything. His smile was bright even in the darkness of the cellars, and Myrcella thought he was the most handsome man to have ever walked the earth. Myrcella thought of those skulls as the sky above Riverrun became shadowed by the flapping of wings. Already men Tristan Martell called the Unsullied were marching into the yard, Sir Barristan Selmy and Sir Jorah Mormont leading them. There were Dothraki on horseback, a mishmash of men in eclectic armor, and, coming up the rear, Arianne Martell and her cousins. But it was the three dragons circling overhead which drew the eyes and gasps of everyone in Riverrun. Even from the ground, Myrcella could see only two of the dragons had riders, the third, the one whose scales were green and bronze, carried no one. If they were large in the air, they were massive upon the ground. Myrcella could hear the direwolves in the castle howling anxiously, undoubtedly sensing the dragons, sensing a threat, and she knew these creatures of Daenerys Targaryens could swallow Grey Wind, Ghost, and Nymeria in one bite. A boy dismounted from the cream-colored dragon, 2 and 10 if he was a day. He was heavily bundled in furs, clearly unused to the cold. His skin was the warm copper of the Dothraki, but his hair was Targaryen white, hanging in a long braid which brushed his shoulders, a single bell in the strands. Rhaego, the Dragon Prince, the son of the Dragon Queen and the greatest Khal who ever lived if Myrcella remembered correctly. In the snow, standing beside his dragon, Ser Jorah helping him walk through the thick embankments, he looked very much a boy. Queen Daenerys Targaryen wore no furs, no cloaks. As she slipped from the black dragon's back, Myrcella saw she wore pants and a painted vest like the Dothraki did in pictures she had seen in Tyrion's books. Her skin was as white as the snow, her silver hair hanging in waves to her waist. Tristan had said she was the most beautiful woman in the world, and Myrcella was starting to believe him as the men around her stared in awe. Sir Barristan and a Dothraki man offered hands to help her, but the queen shook them off, sinking into the snow, laughing as Rhaego said something to her. The sound was so clear and unexpected, Myrcella smiled as well. The Dragon Queen was human after all, a woman only a few years older than Myrcella with a son she loved. It was simultaneously comforting and disappointing. Myrcella had been picturing a woman as fierce as Mage Mormont, not a woman even smaller in stature than she, a woman who did not even carry a weapon. Of course she would not need a weapon. She has dragons. Daenerys stood before them in her Dothraki garb, a small smile upon her lips. Myrcella bent the knee as everyone else did, only to rise with the Dragon Queen's eyes upon her. She was certain Sir Barristan or Arianne had told her all about the King in the North's wife, the sister of King Joffrey, the daughter of the usurper or the Kingslayer depending upon who told the story. Myrcella wondered if she was going to end up in a cell beside Jaime before this was all over. "I wish to see the Kingslayer," Daenerys announced, the strength of her voice in direct contrast to her harmless appearance. Robb nodded. "I will have him brought from the dungeons. My men will need to be seen to as well." Her gaze falling upon Myrcella again, she drawled, "You are the one they call the Kingmaker." Myrcella said nothing, unsure how to answer. Sir Barristan stepped forward and offered, "This is the Princess Myrcella. I should tell you, Princess, I have no love for Lannisters and trust them even less. Everyone knows that the Lannisters have no honor." "As everyone knows the Targaryens are mad," Myrcella retorted, drawing an offended look for Jorah Mormont. Daenerys chuckled softly. "Oh, I am mad, Princess, I do not deny that. But I suspect you have a bit of madness inside of you as well." That Myrcella could not argue. The night before her wedding, Myrcella had not been able to sleep, excitement tangled up with nervousness. She tossed and turned, tried desperately to force herself to rest, but it would not come. It was only when the moon was high in the sky she finally admitted defeat, wrapping herself in a robe to steal down to the kitchens for dream wine. After 6 years at Winterfell, Myrcella knew the corridors as well as any Stark, slipping silently down the servants' passage towards the kitchens, following the way Rickon used when he wanted to steal sweets. The last thing Myrcella expected to find was Jaime leaning against the table, swigging heavily from a wineskin. "Little princesses should be asleep in their beds," Jaime quipped with a languid smile. "You do not want to look a mess for your new husband, do you?" "I cannot sleep. I wanted dream wine." "Dream wine? You are far too young to be needing dream wine to sleep." Jaime lifted her by the hips, setting her on the table before giving her the wineskin. "Regular wine will do just fine for anxious brides. Ursula smiled around the mouth of the skin, the sour Dornish wine causing her to pull a face that made Jaime laugh. After a moment, he asked, "What troubles your sleep, my dear? I thought you wanted to marry the young wolf." "I do," she quickly assured him. "I want to marry Robb, I do." "Then if the wedding does not upset you, what does?" Realization dawned on his face as quickly as the words fell from his lips. "It is the bedding, isn't it?" Ursula blushed, grateful for the darkness of the room so Jaime could not see how brightly red her cheeks were. She stumbled on her words for a moment, trying to craft a lie, but, as it always did with Jaime, the truth came out. "I do not want all the men to tear my dress and see me naked. I tried to tell Mother but she said I was being stupid, that I mustn't do anything to embarrass the family. And she said that worse things come after that, so if I am going to act like a fool over my dress, it will be a very long night." "Sweeterling. Lady Catelyn told me what will happen, but she said it will hurt the first time, and I do not want it to hurt." Tears blurring her vision, she sniffled, "I am going to ruin everything, and Robb will not love me." "Now you are being stupid," Jaime stated, brushing away a stray tear with a calloused thumb. "That boy looks at you as if you are the most wondrous thing he has ever seen. You could geld him tomorrow and he'd still kneel at your feet. But I have to give him an heir. I cannot give him an heir if I cannot be a wife the way I am supposed to be." Jaime took her face firmly between his palms, his emerald eyes flashing in the darkness. "Robb Stark is not Joffrey. What Joffrey did to you was wrong and you did not want it, which is why it hurt you so badly. It will be different with Robb. When you are with someone you want, it is wonderful." "Do you promise?" she whispered. "My most solemn promise." He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "The pain is in the past now, sweeterling. No more worries." "You broke your promise," Ursula thought as two Tully Bannermen delivered Jaime in chains to the main hall. Daenerys sat in the Lord's seat in a fresh gown with a three-headed dragon crown atop her head, Jorah Mormont and Barristan Selmy standing behind her. Robb and Edmure were both seated on either side of the Dragon Queen, Robb in the crown Gendry crafted for him, Edmure dressed finely in Tully colors. As Jaime stumbled to his knees, Ursula moved to help him, but Arianne caught her wrist, shaking her head minutely. "You cannot go to him," Arianne murmured, her lips barely moving. "If you try to free the Kingslayer, she will have your head too." On the other side of her, Theon clasped her shoulder, squeezing gently. Ursula looked at him from the corner of her eye, seeing Theon for mayhaps the first time. He was bartered to the north as much as she had been once, kept so long amongst the Starks that they, too, had become more his family than his own. She remembered Asher teasing him with words like Greenlander at Winterfell, the insinuation he was not truly Ironborn because he would prefer to ride with Robb than take the Seastone chair. The Greyjoys had not wanted Theon any more than the Lannisters had wanted her. But Jaime wanted me. He took care of me. He loved me. And now I'm supposed to just stand by and let him be killed. Someone had washed her uncle, shaved his monstrous beard and dressed him in Lannister colors. Without the rags and beard, Ursula could see just how much weight he had lost, flinching from the sight of how prominent his cheekbones had become. But even as the chains jangled on his wrists and ankles, the wrist chains linked to a cuff around his throat, Ursula could see the Lannister arrogance in his eyes. "I expected you to be bigger, scarier," even Daenerys said, her violet eyes taking everything in. "But you are just a man." When Jaime said nothing, anger flashes across Daenerys's pretty face. "You have nothing to say to me." "You're prettier than your mother," Jaime replied, his voice sounding mildly amused. Daenerys got to her feet, rage radiating off of her. "You mock me. After all you have done to my family, you sit there and jape. I am an evil man, your grace, or did Barristan the Bold not tell you that?" Rolling his eyes, Jaime chuckled mirthlessly. "You should school your face better. Your brother never showed his anger." "Do not speak of my family," she snapped. "If you did not want me to speak of your family, why drag me from my cell? My head comes off just as easily in the dungeons." His smile was practically feral as he drawled, "Or did you wish to hear the tale of how I killed your mad father? How I slid my blade into his body without a second thought? How his blood made the keep truly red?" "Stop it!" Ursula shouted, unable to move forward due to Theon's grip on her. "Jaime, stop. You should learn to control your wife better, your highness," he interrupted, looking at Myrcella but speaking to Robb. "You should have your men take her out until she minds her manners." The moment Robb's eyes met hers, Myrcella knew what was going to happen. Theon easily wrapped her up in his arms, half carrying her and half dragging her, and Myrcella began to fight as viciously as she ever had, fighting even harder than she had when Roderick Castle dragged her away from Winterfell. "No, Theon, Robb, do not do this. Please. Please, your grace, do not take his head. I beg you please." Theon swept her over his shoulder the way he did to her children, trying to contain her legs as she beat uselessly upon his back. He did not stop until they were in her chamber, Theon depositing her upon the bed, his face heavy with apology, before retreating back into the corridor. Myrcella tried to give chase but the door refused to move. She banged with her fists upon the heavy wood but it was useless. By the time she admitted defeat, her hands were bruised black and blue, pain radiating all the way up her arms from her efforts. Night fell before Robb came to her chambers, his face worn and drawn, crown in his hands. Myrcella knew from his expression what he was about to tell her, and the rage she felt was more encompassing than anything which came before. He reached a hand toward her and Myrcella flew at him, slapping him as hard as she could, shouting curses she had never dared to say. Robb caught her wrists, pulling her arms against her chest, waiting for her anger to dissipate. Myrcella was unsure how long she raged before the strength left her, both she and Robb covered in sweat from the strain. The tears came on so quickly, she was unprepared for the force of her sorrow, it hurt to breathe. "He did not want you to see him like that," Robb said, smoothing her hair as he cradled her against his chest, rocking her gently. "He did not want your last memory of him to be his execution." But I did not get to say goodbye," she sobbed. "And he saved the realm. The king was mad. He was not, he was good. I am sorry, my love," he murmured against her hair, his own voice sounding thick with emotion. "I begged the queen to consider something else, but Jaime insisted. He said this was his last chance for honor." His lips soft against the moist skin of her forehead, he added, "But Jaime asked me to tell you something before." Myrcella pulled back to look upon Robb's face. "What?" He said, "The answer is yes." "Do you know what that means?" She nodded shakily, wiping the tears from her cheeks. Sinking fully against Robb, fingers clutching his surcoat tightly, Myrcella stared at Jaime's sword. Finally she declared, "I want to go home. And we shall." Queen Daenerys did one kindness for Jaime Lannister. She did not have his head mounted over Riverrun, did not have his body desecrated. After separating his golden head from his shoulders, Daenerys had what was left of Sir Jaime Lannister placed in a coffin, the men who had been captured with him escorting his bones to Casterly Rock. Myrcella did not keep the seven any longer, but she went to the September the day the bones departed. She lit a candle to the stranger, hoping the light would guide Jaime to peace before lighting a candle to the warrior, asking for strength, for Jaime's strength. It was not until she moved to rise from her prayers she noticed Queen Daenerys in the September's entrance. "Pardon me, your grace, I was..." Dany the Dragon Queen interrupted, taking a seat in a sturdy wooden pew. "You may call me Dany if I may call you Myrcella." Myrcella nodded, confused. "My brother Viserys used to speak of the great September of Baelor when we were in exile. He said the gods would smile upon us and bring us back to our rightful place, he would be the king and I would be his wife as it had been for hundreds of years. And then he would make me recite the names of the men who destroyed the Targaryens like a twisted prayer, Robert Baratheon, Eddard Stark, Jaime Lannister, Tywin Lannister. Then I would have to name all of those who were taken from us, King Aerys, Queen Rhaella, Prince Rhaegar, Princess Elia, Princess Rhaenys, Prince Aegon. Sometimes he would even make me list how they all died. I was taught to believe those men were as heinous as you were taught to believe the Mad King deserved what happened." "Your father was mad," Myrcella stated. "He burnt Eddard Stark's father alive in his armor simply because he came to court at the king's request. I know his sins, Myrcella, just as I am sure you can list those committed by Jaime Lannister. But that did not make them any less our fathers, does it?" Daenerys stared at the flickering candles on the 7 altars. "I do not have a stomach for war. If my husband had lived, I could have easily lived in the Dothraki Sea with Drogo and Rhaego and whatever other children we had. If the usurper had not sent men to kill my son, I would never have crossed the narrow sea. her violet eyes finding Myrcilla's green ones. She said, "Ariane says you would have done the same if your brother had not demanded your son. We are not so different. All I want is peace," Myrcilla admitted. "I want my children to be safe, my husband to be safe. I do not want to have the shadow of the Iron Throne at our backs. And you won't have it. We shall take the twins first, free your husband's men and avenge the Red Wedding. Those men will go north to Winterfell while the rest of our army will march on King's Landing. The Reach will hold back the Westerlands, and the Stormlands will meet us from the south. Your brother's reign will be over by spring. It does not bother you, my willingness to betray my family." Daenerys smiled sadly as she got to her feet. "I have never met Joffrey, but I have heard stories. And I remember all that Viserys did during his life, as well as what it felt like to watch my husband pour molten gold upon his head. Mayhaps others will one day accuse you of kinslaying, Myrcilla, but those people have never known what it is like to have older brothers like ours." Myrcilla remained in the September after Daenerys left, lighting candles for Robb, Theon, and Jon. They would need as many gods watching as possible when the dragons took to the skies. Chapter 7, The Queen in the North. Chapter text. Robb was speaking to someone. As Myrcilla drifted back towards consciousness, she could hear Robb's voice, soft and thick with his northern accent, discussing something. Rolling onto her other side, Myrcilla opened her eyes to find Robb standing near the window overlooking the yard as sunlight began to filter in, Ned wide awake on his chest. "And Brynden," Robb was saying, his fingers idly stroking Ned's back, "he is small but he is so smart. He is only 5, but he already knows all of his letters and reads as well as your older brothers. He wants to be a maester. Your sister Joanna is a beautiful girl. She is so sweet, your grandmother writes how gentle she is." As Ned babbled, Robb chuckled before continuing. "Lya is your Uncle Rickon's natural daughter with your Aunt Elenia, but you will know her as your sister. I am going to legitimize her as Rickon's daughter. She deserves to be a Stark as well. She is like Aunt Arya, which is both good and bad. She says she wants to be a knight, but she is still small, barely even 2. They will love you as you will love them." Myrcilla could hear the longing in Robb's voice, his desire for his words to be true. She knew he worried Ned would not be accepted by their children. Though the children had taken to Lya without incident, Myrcilla knew there was a difference between accepting a cousin and accepting a child your father had with another woman. Myrcilla knew how deeply it had wounded Jon to never fully be accepted as a Stark and how much it bothered Robb. No matter how complicated her feelings were for poor departed Jane Westerling, Myrcilla did not wish for Ned to know that sort of alienation. "You will love Winterfell," Robb stated with more certainty in his voice, beginning to pace the floor as Ned made a high, whining noise. "Your mother was Southron, from the Westerlands, but you have northern blood. Jane was afraid of the north, but I told her it was not nearly as scary as her mother made it sound." Robb was quiet for a moment, bouncing Ned in his arms, before confessing, "Your mother was a wonderful woman with a gentle heart, and I did not do well by her. I suppose I could have learned to love her in time, had it not been for me," Myrcilla silently finished, pressing her face into Robb's pillow, inhaling the scent of him. She suddenly wished she had remained asleep, not wanting to hear the rest of her husband's words. "Myrcilla is my wife and your stepmother, but I hope you will come to love her as your mother. She is. I have loved her since I was barely more than a boy, and I do not know how not to love her. I wed your mother Jane because I thought Myrcilla was dead, and I could not bear it. If you must hate anyone when you are older, place the blame with me. I truly believe Myrcilla would have let Jane be my queen if I had not constantly pushed." Robb pressed a kiss to the top of Ned's head. "I am no king, Ned. I am just a man, and I do not wish you to ever know the sorrows of my life." Myrcilla listened as Greta came to reclaim Ned for his morning feeding, and, when the chamber door closed again, she finally sat up. Robb stood looking out the window, his broad back to her, and she could see the wilt to his shoulders, burdened down by all which was about to happen. In 3 days' time, he, his men, Jon and his dragon were going to march upon the twins to free the allies in the Freys dungeons before going on to Winterfell. While they marched north, Daenerys and her allies were going to King's Landing. If rebellion had been what filled the 7 kingdoms before, all-out warfare was going to be declared, complete with the dragons of old, and it made Myrcilla ill to think of it too closely. "I must be a poor wife if you leave my bed so early." Robb turned, a tired smile on his face. His eyes took in her bare breasts appreciatively as he crossed to the bed, perching beside her. Their lips met in a long, soft kiss before Rob pulled back, absently tucking a lock of hair behind her ear. I am to meet with Sir Jorah and Sir Barristan to discuss the upcoming battles. Tristan is to meet with us as well. Myrcella smiled at the hint of distaste in Rob's voice. Ever since Tristan had too much strong wine one night and groped her during a dance, Rob was desperate to punch the Dornishman. With Arianne's presence at Riverrun, his interactions with the young prince were limited, but even the sound of Tristan's name was enough to spoil his mood. Try to keep a civil tongue. I would keep a civil tongue if he did not lust after you so blatantly. Drawing him down for another kiss, she reminded him, I do not want Tristan Martell. Why would I toil with a prince when I have a king? Rob smirked, tumbling her back against the pillows. Myrcella raised her mouth, her hands already reaching for his laces when Rob caught her hands gently. Pressing kisses to her fingers, he groaned, I must go, but I will be back as quickly as possible. Stay here and do not put a stitch on. You have become so demanding since becoming king. I swear that, when we are at Winterfell again, I will gladly remain naked in your bed for as long as you want me there. But we will not have time because you are the king now, and you belong to the north even more than you belong to me. But Myrcella knew Rob thought the overwhelming demands on his time would lessen once the war was over. He did not understand that keeping the peace was twice as exhausting, that being Warden of the North was not going to be anything when compared to being king in the North. Myrcella remembered what it was like as a child, how her father was constantly being besieged by Jon Arryn and the other men on the small council, how the drinking and the whoring increased as time went on as a way of escaping. He will need a strong hand, she thought as Rob went to his meeting. He trusts Theon as well as anyone, but the North will never fully trust a Greyjoy. Jon's legitimization by Dany makes him Targaryen, he will remain in King's Landing, likely as her consort. Arya has no head for politics, and Gendry knows nothing of the North. Mayhaps Bran if he is willing, he has been invaluable in keeping Ricard protected. But we will also need a small council. Once we've assembled a Kingsguard, he can appoint Lord Commander, that still leaves Master of Coin, Master of Laws, Master of Whispers, Master of Ships, and Grand Maester. Rising from the bed, Myrcella wrapped herself in a heavy robe before sitting at the desk, locating a piece of parchment and beginning to write. Lord Mandaealy should be Master of Ships. Lord Glover certainly deserves a place, as does the Great Jon once he is freed. And I will insist on one of the Mormonts having a seat, they have served us and our family well. If Maester Lewin was alive, we could raise him to Grand Maester, but he perished during the siege. Mayhaps we could find a way to release Sam Tarly of his vows to the wall, he would make a fine Grand Maester. And if Dany strips the Lannisters of their lands and titles, Tommen could come north and we could find a place for him. Rob has always loved Tommen. By the time Rob returned, good-naturedly complaining about the robe on her shoulders, Myrcella had filled 3 pages with appointments and thoughts on how the North should be governed. She listed ideas for the Kingsguard, potential alliances which could be strengthened through marriage, even ideas for how to strengthen relations with Lord Commander Mormont at the wall. Rob stood over her shoulder, reading her careful script. After a moment he set the paper down and sighed. I was simply trying. Why would you make Theon the Master of Whispers? He asked, genuinely curious. Men trust Theon, he is everyone's favorite man to share a drink. And he spends more time in brothels than my uncle Tyrion, and everyone knows whores know all the secrets of the realm, shared by drunken lords and desperate guards. And Tommen as Master of Coin. Well, Lannisters do shit gold. Rob laughed, shaking his head. If Daenerys doesn't take all of the Lannister holdings, if I can convince her that Tommen and Tyrion are not going to work against her, it makes Tyrion Lord of Casterly Rock. Jaime told me Tommen increased the coffers of the Westerlands twice over during his time in the West, and he did so without taxing the poor into absolute hunger. I think he could be a loyal lord to you. Rob nodded silently before remarking, you have not named a hand. I assumed you would want to do so, though I have listed options. You will need a strong hand. The North loves you well, but the North is also the size of the South. You will collapse if you do not have someone to handle the more tedious matters. And if I wished to name you? Is that an option? Myrcella blinked in surprise. I am the queen. I cannot be the hand. Why not? You've listed Gendry as an option for the Kingsguard, and he and Arya have been, whatever he and Arya are for years. We do not have to do everything like they do in the south. Good men can serve a king well without having to hold nothing of their own. Then why can the queen not also by the hand? Rising from her chair, Myrcella crossed her arms over her chest, shaking her head with a shrug. Because I do not want it. I never even wanted a crown. I know everyone calls me the kingmaker, but I did not do it for you or for our children. I only did what I did to keep our children from Joffrey. I know that. You know it, but you do not understand it. Sitting on the bed, Myrcella rubbed her face with her hands before pronouncing, "You do not know what it is like to be a woman and to be a Lannister on top of it. Your men may like me, but if you name me your hand, it will weaken you in their eyes and make them suspicious of me. I'm the daughter of Cersei and Jaime Lannister. No one is like to forget that. And I have told you 100 times I do not care about that. Just because you do not care about it does not mean it ceases to matter to others." Letting Robb tilt her head back so she was staring up into his eyes, she sighed, "I know who I am, Robb, and I am not ashamed of it. Let some deserving man serve as your hand, and I will be content to host their pretty wives and smile. You are worth more than that." Drawing him down for a kiss, she assured him, "I will not be the first capable woman who wastes her days sipping tea and embroidering shirts. But I will be the first who chose uselessness when a kingdom was offered." She was in the Godswood with Ghost and Grey Wind when Prince Roygo found her. His silver hair matched the melting snow on the ground, and he looked semi-ridiculous in this outfit of furs and boots. Not even the men at the wall had worn such heavy furs. Daenerys said the Dothraki Sea did not get cold the way Westeros did, that Slavers Bay became cool but high snows never fell. Myrcella thought it sounded nice to live in a place where winter never beat people so viciously. Roygo was accompanied by 2 Dothraki men, the ones Daenerys called her Blood Riders. The Queen said they spoke the common tongue, but Myrcella only ever heard them speak Dothraki. Irai, one of Daenerys's handmaidens, taught Myrcella a handful of words to help her with Daenerys's people, but her accent was atrocious and often earned more snickers than understanding. When the men saw the wolves, they pulled their arrows, and Myrcella held up her hands. "They won't hurt you," she immediately said. One of the Blood Riders spat something in Dothraki, but Roygo interrupted him in the same language before stepping forward tentatively. "Mother says your husband's wolves are like our dragons. She says they are parts of the Starks. All of Eddard Stark's children have a direwolf. Now that Jon has Roygal, what will happen to his wolf? I imagine he will keep Ghost as well. If his dragon is the Targaryen part of him, then Ghost is the Stark part." Scratching the top of Grey Wind's head, Myrcella told the wolves to return to the castle, and they immediately took off into the trees, loping playfully through the snow. "Have you come to pray to the old gods?" Roygo shook his head. "My mother worships the Seven and my father kept to Dothraki beliefs." His handsome face darkened. "Or so I am told. You do not remember your father. He died the day I was born. A magi promised to save him from blood poisoning, but it was a trick. His name was Khal Drogo, and he was the greatest Khal in the world. His braid was longer than any other man's and full of bells." Myrcella knew from Oberyn that the bells in a Dothraki's hair signified how many men the person had killed. She could hear the tinkle of the single bell in Roygo's braid. "I am sorry you did not know him. I came into the forest because I was bored and Ser Jorah said his people keep the old gods. I wanted to see a heart tree." She gestured to the tree beside her, its face brightly red in the white of the land. "Here it is." The boy stared at the tree for a moment, touching its face with gloved fingers, before asking, "Do you truly think the old gods are in this tree?" "I believe they can be in the heart tree as much as I believe they can be in the great September of Baelor." Roygo nodded before asking, "What did you ask the gods for?" "For the war to end without the people I love dying." "For the war to end? I would like that too." Idly kicking snow with the toe of his boot, he asked, "When the war is over, can your sons come to court so we can play?" For the first time Myrcella truly looked at Daenerys' son and saw just how young he was. Even at 2 and 10, only a few years younger than she had been when she wed Robb, Roygo was still a child who was being asked to ride a dragon into battle, to take back a kingdom which meant nothing to him. Sir Barristan told her Roygo was the subject of a prophecy, that he was the stallion who mounts the world, but Roygo looked less like a warrior and very much like a boy who would prefer to have snowball fights and smile at girls. I am sure they would like that. As she walked with Roygo back to the castle, she thought of Stefan, so far away in Uri, and wondered how heavily the crown would rest upon his head one day. Rob and his men were to depart for the twins in 2 days' time, and the stress of it began to weigh upon Myrcella. She did not dare voice her fears, not when everyone she loved was preparing to go to war, and so Myrcella found herself drinking strong wine that evening in one of the empty parlors. Despite the presence of wine and mead at every meal, Myrcella never much had a taste for it. Too many nights of watching Robert stumble and bellow after indulging too much had soured her on it. But as she swallowed the strong wine back, she found the tension starting to leave her body, her thoughts clouding enough that the ever-present twist of fear in her chest began to loosen. She was well on her way to completely intoxicated when Theon stumbled into the room. His eyes widened at the sight of her drinking directly from the skin before he drawled, amusement thick in his voice, "Are you drunk?" Trying to look intimidating despite the fact the world was starting to blur, she retorted, "You may stay and drink or leave me in peace, but you cannot stay and lecture." Theon held up his hands in surrender. "I would never, Your Grace. May I have a drink?" Myrcella handed him the skin, watched as he took a heavy pull from it. His eyes widened a bit as the liquid hit his tongue before he passed it back. "That's Dornish strong wine. You're going to get sick if you finish all that." "That sounds remarkably like lecturing." Clutching the wineskin tighter, she declared, "I am not going to share my wine with you anymore." Theon smiled as he sank into the chair opposite her. "You are a mean drunk, Selai. I hope you know that. Drinking always made Robert so happy. I thought I would try it." Wiping stray drops of wine from her lips, she bluntly asked, "Why have you never married, Theon? You are over 30, and there are women who would wed you." Theon's face darkened a moment before replying, "I suppose I have not found a lady I have wanted to keep forever. It is hard to find ladies in brothels, I suppose." Ignoring his irritated expression, she continued, "You are a good man. Promise me you will not die when you go north." "I will not die," he dutifully replied. "Nor will I allow Rob to die." "Make sure he does not take another wife as well," she retorted, and Myrcella was surprised by the bitterness in her voice. She had never fully discussed Jane with Rob, especially since her death, and, though she was doing everything she could to nurture Ned, there was still a burn in her chest at the reminder of Jane Westerling. "Mayhaps I am more like Lady Catelyn than I believed." Theon reached over, taking the wineskin from her hand. She could tell from his expression he had no intentions of giving it back. "Don't get angry because you don't want to be scared. It will get you both killed." Flushing from embarrassment, feeling as chastised as a child, Myrcella stumbled to her feet, nearly tumbling over. Theon rose, bracing her by the elbow, and she sagged against him, grateful for the support. "Please do not tell him what I said," she murmured as Theon began to escort her back towards her rooms. Theon nodded. "It would serve no purpose. But I did mean what I said, you should marry." His laughter was as bitter as her snipe about Rob. "I have nothing to offer a lady. Asher sits upon my throne, and, though I am no longer a hostage, I have nowhere else to go even if I wanted to leave. The North will never see me as anything but a treasonous Greyjoy, and the Iron Isles will only ever see me as a Greenlander. If I am lucky, Rob will arrange a marriage for me with some witless maid no other fool wanted." Myrcella instantly thought of Lolly Stokeworth. "I will find you a good lady to love. Oh, my heart was stolen long ago by a sweet, little princess who married my brother." Theon smiled disarmingly, the echo of pain visible in his eyes even through her haze of drunkenness. "I shall never love again and must content myself with wenches and dishonorable ladies. You would not want my love, Theon. The price is far too high." Nearly tripping up a stair, she slurred, "If Rob had married someone else, even if he had married Jane to start, he would be in Winterfell right now with Eddard and Rickon and all the rest. He would be safe and sound. Everyone would be safe and sound. Rob is happy to pay it." When she tripped again, her face narrowly avoiding a stone wall, Theon swept her into his arms. Myrcella wanted to protest, but her stomach was churning. Closing her eyes, Myrcella did not realize she drifted off to sleep until she awoke to Rob's hands on her face, concern on his face. "My head hurts," she whimpered, and Rob cracked a smile. Strong wine does that. Slipping his hands beneath her back, undoing the laces there before drawing the gown carefully from Myrcilla's body, Rob said, I cannot remember you ever having more than a few glasses of wine in all the time I've known you. Trying to wrestle herself free from her shift, she mumbled, everyone looks so happy when they drink. I thought it would make me forget for a little bit. She dropped back against the pillows, tossing her shift to the floor, now clad in only her small clothes. I do not want to be left behind. Rob brushed a soft kiss against her brow. Never again, my love. The next time Myrcilla woke, it was to vomit everything in her stomach. Rob roused beside her, calling a servant to bring fresh water. By the time Myrcilla was finished and the servant took away the basin, her throat burned like fire and her stomach ached. I shall never drink again, she moaned as she rinsed the sour taste from her mouth. Rob rubbed her back comfortingly. It has happened to us all, sweeterling. When you are feeling better, I shall tell you a very funny one about Rukan, a mule, 2 ladies from Acorn Hall, and a very angry miller. Setting back into the furs, Rob cradling her against his chest, she whispered, I miss Rukan so much. Every time I see Arya or Gendry, I look for him. I loved him as well as Tommen. I know. His fingers carding through her hair, he divulged, the day word of the siege reached us, I could not find him anywhere. When I finally found him, he was in a grove of trees just, hacking with his sword, crying harder than he had since he was a babe. He was shouting how he was going to kill everyone, how he was going to take Roose Bolton's head with ice, how he was going to burn King's Landing to the ground. And then he said, how could he kill her? She was my best friend. Myrcilla pressed her face against his shoulder, tears stinging her eyes. You must kill the Freys for what they did to him and Shaggydoag. I will, Rob solemnly swore. And for Littlejohn, for Dacey, for every man who went to that damned wedding and found themselves betrayed. Then I will march north and make Roose Bolton pay for all he did. I will pull the Dreadfort apart stone by stone with my bare hands if I must. Dreadfort should be Theon's, she murmured as sleep began to pull at her again. He deserves a home of his own when the war is done. Everyone deserves a home. Careful, Your Grace. You are starting to sound more like a septon than a king. Tucking the furs more securely around their bodies, he teased, if you were not so sickened from wine, I would prove to you how unlike a septon I truly am. Myrcilla drifted off to sleep, her dreams full of Winterfell, direwolves, and the little boy who once declared he would duel Rob for the right to marry her as long as she promised to never make Shaggydoag sleep outside. Jon found her as the men were preparing to depart from Riverrun. Myrcilla could not bring herself to go out into the yard, afraid she would cling to Rob and beg him not to go, and so she remained in one of the solas, watching as Roigo petted Viserion as if he was nothing more than one of Tommen's kittens. They don't scare you, Jon commented as he stood shoulder to shoulder with her, pointing to Viserion and Roigo. They scare me, she corrected, absently reaching down to scratch Ghost's head. It is just that the size of them does not surprise me. There are dragon skulls in the lower levels of the Red Keep. Jon nodded. It is strange. When I am with Ghost, I have this connection to him like the one Rob has with Grey Wind or Arya has with Nymeria, even Sansa talks of her bond with Lady. But when I go near Roigo, it is as if there is something more. Blood of the dragon. But did Lyanna Stark willingly create a child with the Dragon Prince, or did he take what he wanted? A flicker of a bitter smile tugged at his lips. Dany had black armor inlaid with rubies made for me, armor like Rhaegar's, so all of Westeros knows I am King Jon Targaryen, the prince who was promised. You do not believe it. My blood may be Targaryen, but my father was Eddard Stark. I can be dressed in Rhaegar's armor, I can even share the Iron Throne with Dany, but I am a Stark of Winterfell. His eyes met hers meaningfully. Like you. Like me, she agreed. As Roigo hopped upon Viserion's back, Myrcilla teased, Tyen tells me you have spent many a night in the Queen's bed. Jon's cheeks burned crimson. Tyen is a gossip. But not a liar. Rob thinks it is disgusting because, if Roigo was my father, then Daenerys is my aunt. I have the better claim for the throne, he says, and I do not need to warm Dany's bed to claim it. My parents were twins, so I cannot cast a stone. But I do not think you stay in Dany's chambers because you are so desperate to have a crown. Turning, wrapping her arms firmly around Jon, she declared against the thick wool of his shirt, I do not care if you are a Targaryen, a Stark, or a base-born bastard. Just come back because I could not stand to lose another brother. Jon squeezed her tightly, pressing a kiss to the crown of her head. I had hoped you would do me a favor. Myrcella lifted her head to meet his gaze. Anything. I cannot bring Ghost aboard Rorigal, and he does not listen to Robb half so well as he listens to you. I was hoping you would care for him until I return. Of course. Resting her head against his chest again, she sighed, do not die again, Jon Snow, or I will be very angry. I shall do my very best. Stealing my wife, Snow? Robb asked as he entered the room, his armor already in place, looking every ounce the king he was. Myrcella thought of the last time she saw Eddard Stark, how large and imposing he seemed as he tried to fight back Roose Bolton's men, how certain she was he would use his great sword to send the men of the Dread Fort back. Robb did not appear intimidating to her, he never had, but she knew he would do whatever it took to return the Starks to Winterfell. Mayhaps she is stealing me, Jon japed as he pulled away, bending to ruffle Ghost's fur before rising. Brushing a kiss against Myrcella's forehead, he said, I should get my armor from Gendry. Take good care of Ghost. Take good care of Robb. Jon grinned as his eyes briefly landed on Robb. I will try, but he is not nearly as well behaved as Ghost. Robb's laughter followed Jon out of the solar, and Myrcella tried to steel herself for this goodbye. She thought of Cersei Lannister, of the way she would never cry out when Robert's hand connected with her cheek, of the utterly placid expression she wore even when the world was collapsing down around her. In that moment, Myrcella wished she had more of Cersei in her. Robb smoothed his hands over her hair. You needn't worry so. I will have more than enough men to support me and a bloody dragon as well. Besides, once the Great Jon is free of his cell, he will do more damage than Jon's dragon ever will. Hating the plaintive tone of her voice, she asked, why can I not come? Arya says I am as good with a sword as any of your men, and I have Jaime's blade. And should something happen, you will be Queen Regent until Steffon is of age, he interrupted, his voice kind but firm. Gendry is remaining with you as a member of the King's Guard until we can appoint a true guard. If I should fall. Robb. If I should fall, he continued, raising his voice to cut off her words, Theon and Jon will take the men north to reclaim Winterfell. Robert Arryn is marching the Vale's forces to join with ours in the north while the Blackfish guards Steffon in the Eyrie. When Winterfell has been secured, the Blackfish will return Steffon there. Sansa has the children on Bear Island with Mother Mage is leaving a contingent of men there before marching to meet us with the mountain clans. The Reeds will hold the neck. Once we pass, there is no way for a Southron force to reach us. Robb. He gently pressed his fingers to Myrcella's lips. Let me finish, love. Sansa has offered to foster Ned if you do not wish. I have left instructions that you are to appoint the small council. If you remarry. Stop it, she cried as tears flooded her eyes. You are not going to die, and I am not going to remarry. You are going to take back our home, and we are going to rule the north. Now kiss me and go take the twins. Robb smiled, his own eyes moist with emotion before obeying, his mouth firm and insistent against hers. Myrcella wrapped her arms around his neck, trying to draw him nearer, and she felt his hands clutch at the material of her skirts desperately, undoubtedly reminded of their last goodbye, of all the pain which followed. She could taste the salt of their combined tears on her tongue, his fingers biting into the soft flesh of her hips, and Myrcella forced herself to pull away. I shall see you when the war is over, he vowed, only the slightest of uncertainty in his tone. I shall be waiting. When Robb's men left for the north, when Daenerys's men left for King's Landing, when Arianne's men left to join with Renly at Storm's End, Myrcella sat with Ghost in the nearly empty dining hall pushing her food about her plate. Lady Roslyn and Ed Muir's children were somewhere in the castle, Roslyn as aware as Myrcella that, for her husband to win, her family must lose. Myrcella wanted to offer her kind words, but Roslyn had cared deeply for Jane and missed her presence. When Gendry finally joined her, taking the seat opposite of her, his plate piled high with food, Myrcella looked up and noticed, not for the 100th time, how much Arya's lover looked like Renly, like what Robert must have looked like when he was young. Though never gregarious, Gendry was rarely downright unfriendly, especially after years spent at Riverrun and amongst Robb's men. Arya good-naturedly complained he was stupid, but Myrcella was observant enough to know there was nothing stupid about Gendry Baratheon. He was quiet and a bit gruff, but he was as loyal to Robb as Theon, Jon, or Bran. Tonight, though, Gendry's expression was deeply troubled, downright angry, and Myrcella suspected she knew precisely why. "I did not want to be left behind either," she offered, pushing her beats aside the way Tommen once did. Gendry raised his blue eyes, his guarded expression faltering a bit. Finally he said, "Arya has never ridden into battle without me by her side." "How did you even meet Arya?" Swallowing back some mead, he said, "I was an apprentice in King's Landing when Arya came in with this little sword Jon Snow gave her. The blade broke somehow and she wanted it fixed. My master wasn't in the shop, and she offered me a handful of dragons to repair it without telling anyone, which I did. But every day she came to the shop to make sure I would not cheat her, bold and moody as could be. Even after I fixed it, she kept coming back. She didn't care much for court and wanted a friend. One day Lord Stark followed her in. He took one look at me, knew whose bastard I was, and next thing I knew, I was being sent here to be the new armorer." "And Arya?" Gendry cracked a smile. "You've never heard this story." When Myrcella shook her head, he explained, "Joffrey found her play jousting with Bran and Tommen one day, and Arya said she could ride a better tilt than he could. When she unhorsed him before most of court, Joffrey was humiliated, your queenly mother was furious, and Lord Stark sent her here to keep Lady Tully company." Myrcella laughed at the image of Joffrey unseated by Arya. "And the rest is history, I suppose." Hesitating only a moment, she asked, "Why do you not marry her?" "By rights, you are the Lord of Storm's End." Renly would. "I am no Baratheon, king's words or not. I know nothing of the Stormlands and no man is going to bend the knee to the son of an alehouse worker." "But you love her," she stated with certainty. "You would die for her." Gendry was quiet for a long beat before divulging, "When the siege of Winterfell happened, when Lord Stark died, she came to me in the forge and dragged me to the Godswood. She made me take off her cloak and put mine on her shoulders, and then she said we were wed." He shrugged. "Arya does things as Arya wishes. I envy her that." Gendry refilled his cup, his face serious. "I swore to your husband I would let no harm come to you. And I swore to Arya I would let no harm come to your children. I appreciate that." A smirk tugged at his lips. "Appreciate it all you want, your grace, but I am telling you this because I do not like to break my promises. And while I do not know you well, I have seen you swing your sword with Arya enough to know you could easily seek out trouble." "I will seek no trouble," she promised. "But I will face whatever trouble finds its way to me." The Raven arrived a fortnight after Robb's army marched, the letter sealed with a wax direwolf. Myrcella tore it open like a child with a present, desperate to read Robb's words, to read any words about what was happening. "The twins has been taken," the phrase put to sword. "Edmure and his men are remaining here to hold it while we continue. Our men are free. We march north. When Daenerys sends word, go to King's Landing and wait for instructions." Daenerys's raven arrived 3 days later, a red seal with a 3-headed dragon adorning the letter, her bold hand declaring that the Crown lands had fallen and King Joffrey and his supporters were in cells. "If you wish to be present for the trials, I will wait for your arrival. If you do not wish to see your family fall, I will not force you to come." Myrcella scribbled her promise of arriving as quickly as her horse could carry her before ordering Gendry and the men left to protect her to ready for a ride to King's Landing. Someone would need to speak for Tommen, for Tyrion, for sweet Elaine Tarly and her babe, for Margaery Tyrell and Sir Aris Oakurt. And if anyone was going to see Joffrey pay for the evils he had done, it was Myrcella. Myrcella barely recognized King's Landing as they rode into the city. When she last left King's Landing, people were literally starving to death in the streets, unrest heavy with Joffrey's ascendance to the throne. Now, with the Dothraki and Unsullen in the streets, food being distributed by Daenerys, there were no beggars crying for coin, no men who looked ready to attack in hopes of stealing their riches. As she rode through the streets, Ghost keeping pace beside her, the crown she rarely wore atop her head, people turned to look at her. She saw them point and whisper, undoubtedly noticing Jaime's sword on her hip, her Lannister looks and her Stark wolf. When the first person bent the knee, Myrcella thought Daenerys was in the crowd. It was only when the others began to do the same as she rode past, their heads bowed in deference, Myrcella realized they were bending for her, for the Queen in the north come to court. Sir Barristan met them at the entrance to the castle, clad once again in his white armor and cloak, and Myrcella could not help but smile as he helped her from her horse. I trust your trip was well, Your Grace, Sir Barristan said as she smoothed the lines on her gown, his nose wrinkling briefly at the sight of Jaime's sword. Yes, thank you, Sir Barristan, she replied, the words more automatic than anything, the courtly manners unconscious as ever. As Sir Barristan led her to the throne room, Gendry and Ghost on either side of her, Myrcella noticed the Lannister and Baratheon tapestries had been replaced with Targaryen ones, all trace of lions and stags erased. She heard Gendry gasp as they entered the throne room, dragon skulls once again lining the walls, and Myrcella heard murmurs of shock from the assembly of people inside at the sight of her. They thought me as dead as Robert. And those that knew I lived, think me as nothing more than another Lannister. Daenerys sat upon the Iron Throne clad in a gown of crimson and black, her dragon crown atop her silver hair, a smile stretching across her face. Queen Myrcella, we are so grateful you and Sir Gendry could join us while your husband is in the north. Myrcella dropped into a curtsy, ignoring the looks of the familiar men and women in the hall. Thank you for the invitation, Queen Daenerys. Would you like to rest before we begin? Myrcella rose, shaking her head through the exhaustion in her limbs. No, Your Grace, I am ready to begin. The members of Joffrey's small council came first, a mixture of men Myrcella knew her whole life and newer men she barely recognized. Lord Varys and Mace Tyrell were pardoned, Lord Baelish was sent back to the Fingers and Grand Maester Pycelle, to Old Town. Myrcella did not know the other men, but one swore he would return his family to Essos and the other took the knee. Margaery Tyrell came next, looking as plain as Myrcella had ever seen her, but, while her face was plainly deferential, Myrcella could still see the wonderfully scheming girl she loved so in her eyes. When her pardon was announced, her queenly title stripped, Margaery thanked Daenerys effusively. If I may, Your Grace, Margaery ventured, voice still soft and subservient, I would ask permission to remain at court. I would serve you well, Queen Daenerys, and Queen Myrcella will attest to my loyalty to your reign. She is correct, Your Grace, Myrcella agreed. Margaery was one of your most loyal supporters while I was at court. Daenerys was quiet for a moment before nodding minutely. Rise, Lady Margaery. I will grant your request. Sir Loras, please escort your sister to one of the rooms for my ladies. As Margaery dutifully took her brother's arm, Myrcella could see the grin in Margaery's eyes. Always growing, indeed. Tommen was brought next, and Myrcella nearly rushed from her seat to embrace him. He was as tall as Jaime now, though still plump, his hair was a bit too long, his cheeks covered in several days' growth, and his fine clothing was dirty. His green eyes widened when he saw her and he tried to move forward, shouting her name, when two of Daenerys's blood riders caught him, forcing him to the knee. Do not hurt him. Myrcella cried, rising to her feet. He means me no harm. Tommen's face crumpled as the Dothraki cautiously stepped back. They told me you were dead, he said, his voice trembling as it had when he was small. Before Myrcella could reply, Daenerys said, Tommen Baratheon, you have been called to court to answer for the crimes of your family. I have been told you raised no arms during your brother's false reign. Is this true? Tommen cautiously nodded. I was at Casterly Rock with my wife and son. Do you believe Robert Baratheon was the true king of Westeros, that your brother Joffrey has a right to the throne? Tommen was quiet for a long moment before he answered, his voice stronger than Myrcella ever heard it. Even if Robert Baratheon was the true king, Joffrey would have no right as he, my sister, and I are not of his seed. Meeting Daenerys's gaze, he declared, I do not want your throne, Queen Daenerys, nor will my son. I will not try to save Joffrey after all he has done. But if you need to have my head, I only ask you spare my lady wife, who would never commit treason, and my son, who is only a babe. Daenerys was silent for so long, Myrcella announced, the North will take him, Your Grace, he and his family. We will make sure he commits no treason. And if he does, would your husband take your brother's head? Daenerys challenged. The North has no place for oath-breakers. I give you my word, if Tommen tries to rise against the Iron Throne, I will take his head myself. Daenerys studied her for a moment before declaring, I pardon you, Tommen Baratheon, of your crimes in service to the false king, but you will live out your days as a hostage of the king in the north. Return him to his wife and son, but keep a northern guard upon him until he is taken to Winterfell. Tommen stumbled a bit as he rose, his eyes finding Myrcella's, and she wished she could rush to him, assure him he would be comfortable and safe with her. He smiled, mouthing thanks, before being rushed away, Tyrion coming to rest in his abandoned place. Unlike Tommen, there was nothing particularly fearful in his demeanor. Much like Jaime, he came before the Dragon Queen with an impertinent smile and Lannister bravado. As Daenerys listed the crimes of which he was accused, Tyrion yawned before winking at Myrcella, a smirk on his face. Myrcella could see the anger starting to rise in Daenerys at his refusal to be cowed, and Myrcella wanted to shout out a warning, wanted to keep Tyrion from his older brother's fate. "Am I amusing to you, imp? All I find amusing, your grace, is you think I possess enough power to overthrow dragons. You must have me confused with my brother. I took your brother's head." Tyrion's face darkened, the first true hints of his rage flickering in his mismatched eyes. "Yes, I know. I received his bones." "How kind of you, Queen Daenerys." Tyrion Myrcella began, warning thick in her voice. Tyrion did not listen. "You may kill me, but I will not stand here and beg. Even an imp has pride. My only crime is being a Lannister. I was your brother Viserys Sage when your father was slain. I would say something kind about him, but, truth be told, he was a cruel, little bastard. I didn't help Robert fight his rebellion, didn't hold a command in any of Joffrey's armies, and, when your men sacked King's Landing, I didn't do anything but walk into my cell. So take my head for being a Lannister, your grace. After all, it is what your father would have done." Myrcella was certain she was going to declare his life forfeit, waiting with bated breath for the pronouncement. It was only after an uncomfortably long silence, Daenerys said, "Tyrion Lannister, I hereby strip you of all lands, monies, and holdings. You are banished from the 6 kingdoms of Westeros. Should you be found in any kingdom by the next moon, your life will be forfeit." "What of the North, your grace?" "I am not queen in the North, imp." Tyrion turned to face Myrcella, a hint of a smile on his lips. "Am I welcome in the North, Queen Myrcella? I have many skills which could be of use to the North." "You are welcome," Myrcella said, ignoring the look of distaste on Daenerys's face, "under the same terms as Tommen." Cersei fought as they brought her before the Iron Throne, shrieking for the guards to release her. She was more unkempt than Myrcella ever remembered seeing her, her hair wild and uncombed, her dress filthy and torn. There was a wildness in her eyes which scared her. Jaime once told her his time in a cell did not bother him much because soldiers were prepared to be held. Cersei had not been conditioned for a cage which was not gilded. Daenerys said Cersei's name several times but Cersei did not respond, her gaze focused on the sword at Myrcella's side, Jaime's sword. When Daenerys ordered she be returned to her cell, declaring her to be mad, Cersei suddenly reared forward, voice echoing in the chamber as she shrieked, "I should have smothered you at birth. Jaime was worth 10 of you, you treasonous whore. Kinslayer. You shall burn in all 7 hells for what you have done. Take her out." Daenerys shouted as a wave of comments began amongst the people. Myrcella could feel the eyes of the court upon her, waiting for her reaction. She wanted to shout how she tried to save Jaime, how she would have done anything to keep him alive. She wanted to smack Cersei the way Robert had and scream how unfair it was of her to bear Jaime's children and pass them off as Robert's, to love a monster like Joffrey and completely disregard her and Tommen. But most of all Myrcella wanted to ask her why Jaime, why Joffrey, why did she act so recklessly and maliciously when it was not needed? But Myrcella did none of that. Instead she reached down, anxiously twisting her fingers in Ghost's fur, and schooled her face to reveal nothing. Daenerys gave her the Tower of the Hand for her quarters, but Myrcella could not sleep. Come morning, Joffrey, Tywin, and Gregor Clegane would be brought before court for their sentences. Myrcella did not even try to convince herself they would be spared. The Mountain deserved death for what he did to Elia Martell and baby Aegon, and Myrcella knew from Arianne that Oberyn was going to provide that justice, the same with Tywin who ordered the murders of Rhaegar's family. As for Joffrey, even if Daenerys did not put him to death for his activities as false king, Myrcella knew she would insist he be put to sword for engineering the Red Wedding, for releasing Bolton upon the north. Joffrey Baratheon, the false king, would die tomorrow, and Myrcella could not bring herself to summon up even a sliver of compassion for him. The men guarding the black cells did not want to let her pass, shifting uneasily and sputtering about needing permission from Queen Daenerys. Myrcella found it surprisingly easy to adopt Cersei's voice as she ordered them to let her pass or she would talk to the queen. Even with a torch, it was difficult to see, but Myrcella remembered the black of the forest outside Winterfell, The blind darkness of the wall cells did not scare Myrcella. Joffrey was housed in the cell nearest the entrance, and he flinched from the light when she raised her torch, shielding his eyes. He was positively filthy, a patchy beard on his face, and, when he saw exactly who was standing outside his cell, his eyes widened in an approximation of fear. "You are dead." "Once I suppose I was," she agreed, sinking upon a stool she borrowed from one of the turnkeys, "but I rose again. Mayhaps if you had sent better men, I would have known true death." Joffrey's face darkened. "You are not real. I have been ill-fed here, you are a hallucination, a fever dream. Do you often dream of me? Are they dreams of regret for what you did or dark dreams of what you wish you did?" When Joffrey said nothing, she assured him, "I am no dream, brother. I am Myrcella Stark, Queen in the North, and I have come to see you before the Dragon Queen ends your pitiful life." "She will not dare. You have no friends in the kingdoms," Myrcella cut in, settling into the role of taunter far better than she expected to. "Dragons are powerful allies, and, even before she left Dragonstone, all but the Westerlands aligned with us. No one is coming to save you. And if you request a trial by combat, Sir Barristan will gladly open you from my navel to neck." "You cannot scare me," he lied. "I do not tremble before northern whores. I have not come to scare you. I have come to say the last words I will ever say to you, and I want you to hear them." Leaning close, her voice as cold as the wall, she said, "I want you to know you did all of this. The North and its allies would never have joined with Daenerys if you had not decided to take my son simply to be spiteful. I would not have delivered the North, and I want you to know without a shadow of doubt that it was I who told Arianne Martell I would deliver the North, that it was I who brought the Stormlands to the war. I plotted treason in the keep while you dismissed me as a northern whore, and I did it happily." "Shut up!" Joffrey shouted, smacking at the bars. "On his deathbed, Robert told me you would fuck the kingdom to all seven hells, and he lamented the fact I was not a boy. And Jaime, he knew what a twisted monster you are. You will die as the false king, a shadowy blight on the history of Westeros, and I will reign in the North while my sons and their sons are the kings of winter. I want you to go to your death knowing I beat you at the Game of Thrones and you were so blindly stupid, you did not even know I was playing. Shut up, you fucking whore." Myrcella rose from the stool, staring at the man who had tormented her so much of her life, who lurked over her shoulder always threatening to attack again. "You had good, honorable men like Eddard and Rickon Stark murdered. You raped me when I was a child, and you did it with a smile on your face. You deserve more pain than you will ever be given, but I will settle for seeing your head on a pike, your eyes eaten by crows, and your name utterly forgotten." Turning, refusing to look back as Joffrey pathetically cried her name, Myrcella left the dungeons of the Red Keep, returned to her chambers, and slept soundly for the first time since the war began. She did not go to court to watch her grandfather and brother be condemned to death. She did not go to look upon Joffrey's head mounted alongside Tywin's and the mountains. She did not light candles to the stranger or pray at the heart tree. What Myrcella did do was tell Daenerys the North would not welcome Cersei Lannister, guaranteeing her mother would be exiled to Essos. In the end it did not matter. Daenerys questioned every man in the Red Keep, but no one would tell who put the poison in Cersei's soup. Tywin said the poison was something called the Strangler, a particularly nasty poison which killed quickly and efficiently. Myrcella stared upon her mother's body with a peculiar sense of detachment before instructing for her body to be cleaned and placed in a casket. "I am sorry," Myrcella, Daenerys offered later after inviting Myrcella to sup with her. She did not know how to live without Jaime. Mayhaps it was better this way. Myrcella knew the words were truth, her mother would not have been able to bear living without Jaime and Joffrey. "There is the matter of Casterly Rock," the Dragon Queen said after a moment. "Ser Jorah says I should give it as a worthy man. Sir Barristan says it should be raised like Castle Maria. Already Mace Tyrell has put forth Sir Loras as a worthy Warden of the West, and Tristan Martell has also been put forth as an option. Who would you suggest?" "My good sister Sansa is wed to Quentyn Martell. Quentyn is far more reserved than Tristan or Arianne, but he is loyal and smart. Sansa has been on Bear Island in hiding, but she has a familiarity with Asher Greyjoy which could be useful with the Iron Isle so near. They would be good wardens." Daenerys nodded in understanding. "I will take it under advisement." Sipping her wine, she said, "It is a pity." "What is?" "That you are queen in the North. I would quite like for you to remain at court. Myrcella smiled wryly. You are the only one, Your Grace. I make people nervous here. You are not the only one. Daenerys sighed. I thought peace would feel more peaceful. Mayhaps when spring comes. If it ever does. Jon returned on Rorigal's back just as the snow started to melt, the dragon's wings blotting out the sunlight. Myrcella resisted the urge to rush to him, to demand every detail of the northern conquest. He was no longer her friend from the wall and she was not just Robb's wife any longer. Men took the knee now as Jon Snow, now King Jon Targaryen, strode past them, the rubies in his armor glittering in the sun, his Valyrian blade strapped to his back. The story of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark was now legend, whispered and elaborated on with every passing day. It did not cease to amaze Myrcella how people swore they knew what happened when very few people remained from before the rebellion. He came to her in the Tower of Hand, dropping down to playfully tussle with Ghost before smiling at her. His beard was thicker now, closer to how Eddard Stark once wore his, and his curls were even wilder than they had been at the wall. It simultaneously made him look older and younger than ever. How would you like to go home, my lady? Myrcella shivered at the word. Home, the hills, the Godswood, the hot springs, the warm stone walls and familiar hallways, the scent of winter mixed in with freshly baking bread and a smell which was distinctively Winterfell. Home was Robb and their children, old Nan and her stories, Hodder and his gentle ways, Lady Catelyn and her small smiles, Jory Castle and his infinite patience, grey wind romping through the snow. All Myrcella wanted was home, so hungry and desperate for it, it was a physical pain. But instead all she said was, yes, please. Daenerys summoned her to her chambers while the carts were loaded for the trek north. Myrcella tried to hide how bizarre it was to stand in what had once been Robert's chambers and see no trace of him, only Dany's mishmash of decorations from all the places she had been. The Dragon Queen did not look particularly queenly today. She was in her Dothraki garb, her feet bare, and her long hair hung in a loose braid down her back. Myrcella smiled when Daenerys hopped from the bed, handing her a large package tied with ribbon. I know things are different in the north, but I had some things made for you. If you are going to return to Winterfell a queen, you should look like one. Thank you, Your Grace. Dany, she corrected gently. Is there nothing I could do to get you to remain here? Nothing could make me stay. It has been years since I have seen my children, and the north is my home. Myrcella squeezed the package against her chest as she declared, and if I learned anything from my mother and Margaery, it is that 2 queens in the Red Keep is unpleasant for everyone. Dany chuckled, recognizing the truth in the statement. You will always be welcome here, Myrcella, you and your family. The Targaryens will not forget all the Starks have done for us. Over the past few months, Myrcella had spent a fair amount of time with Daenerys, and, though she was not sure she would ever truly be able to forgive Dany for taking Jaime's head, she also liked the Mad King's daughter. And Myrcella knew from her conversations with Jon that he was going to wed Daenerys Targaryen, was going to remain in King's Landing and help rule the South. Daenerys Targaryen was going to be family, and Myrcella was going to need to learn to make peace with what had been done to Jaime. When things are settled, mayhaps we will even come visit you in the north. I would like that. Daenerys moved forward, offering Myrcella a brief embrace. Myrcella smiled at just how small the Dragon Queen was, the top of her head barely reaching Myrcella's chin. In another life, Myrcella, I believe we could have been excellent friends. This life is not over yet, Dany. There is still time. Later, as Myrcella rode the fine, new horse Jon secured for her, she spared a backward glance towards the Red Keep, towards all of King's Landing. In the distance she could still see what remained of Gregor Clegane's head, the blurry shapes of Tywin and Joffrey. Turning her attention back towards the road, Myrcella grasped the reins a bit tighter and urged her horse on a little faster. Winterfell was waiting. When Winterfell came into view, Myrcella no longer felt the overwhelming exhaustion that the month-long journey caused. She did not think about Tommen or Tyrion, Elaine or her baby. All Myrcella could think was home, and she dug her heels in hard to the sides of her horse, taking off into a run. She heard Gendry swear behind her as his own horse took off, shouting her name to get her to slow, but Myrcella refused, not when she was finally home. Myrcella vaguely knew the men at the gates as members of House Karstark, but she could not recall their names. Both took the knee as they let her pass, and, when she entered the yard, slipping from her saddle, she knew no one was expecting her party until later. As Gendry finally caught her, breathing hard from the pursuit, Myrcella prepared to apologize before she caught sight of Brynden coming out of the glass gardens. She cried his name, tears flooding her eyes. The last time she saw Brynden, he was screaming her name, his little hands reaching for her as Jory rushed him away. He was 5 now, still only half the size of his brothers at that age, but, as his green eyes widened, Myrcella knew he remembered her. "Mother," he screamed, rushing towards her as fast as his legs could carry him. Myrcella met him halfway, scooping him into her arms and holding him tightly against her breast. She tried to forget those awful months when she thought she would never hold him in her arms again, when he and the girls were lost to her. "I will never let you go again," she vowed as she pressed kisses to his blonde curls. "Mother! Mother!" Myrcella pivoted to see Stefan and Ricard rushing towards her, dropping their bows as they ran. She could see Robb and Theon following the boys, their own bows slung over their shoulders, but her eyes were only for her sons as Stefan and Ricard attached themselves to her legs, squeezing her tightly. Both were tall and healthy boys, though Ricard's hair was longer, worn in the same fashion as Bran, while Stefan's dark hair was closely cropped to his head. Myrcella bent to place Brynden back upon his feet, allowing Stefan and Ricard to hug her properly, and she could only cry harder when Stefan, always the more sensitive of the two, clumsily wiped at her cheeks and said, "Don't cry, mother." Robb pulled her to her feet when he reached them, lifting her as easily as she had Brynden. Myrcella gasped at how passionately he kissed her, surprised at how affectionate he was being before the rapidly filling yard, but she clung to him, shivering at the blatant hunger in his blue eyes. "Welcome home, Your Grace," he purred, and Myrcella was certain she loved him more in that moment than she ever had. Lady Catelyn embraced her tightly when she entered the castle, whispering how happy she was to see her, and Myrcella clung as tightly to Catelyn Stark as her boys had to her. She wanted to apologize for not doing more to save Eddard, for putting Rickon in danger, but the moment she said, "I'm sorry," Catelyn cut her off, ordering her to never apologize to her for things which could not be controlled. Catelyn took her to the girls, both fast asleep in the same bed, Joanna's red hair tangled with Lya's black hair. Myrcella sat on. "I will tell her stories about him," Myrcella decided as she tucked the blanket more securely around the girls. "I will make sure she knows how wonderful Rickon was and how he used to sneak into the nursery to hold her. I will tell her how he died a hero and would have loved her as well as any father in Westeros. But all of that could wait. For now, all that mattered was Myrcella was home and her children were safe." The raven arrived just after all the trees bloomed green again. Myrcella accepted the letter, sealed with the 3-headed dragon, and opened it with slight trepidation. Reading the words, she went to find Robb. All of the children were in the yard. Stefan and Ricard were training with Jory, Brynden and Joanna were playing Come Into My Castle, and Lya had hold of Ned's hand, leading him around on his unsteady legs. Myrcella asked one of the servants if he had seen the king, and the man pointed to the Godswood. She found Robb before the heart tree, calmly polishing ice as he sat against the ancient tree. He looked up at the sound of her footfalls, his smile wide until he saw the letter in her hand. Myrcella caught the brief flash of fear in his eyes as he asked, "What is it?" "Nothing bad." Coming to stand beside him, she handed him the letter. "Queen Daenerys is with child. Jon has invited us to court when the child is born." Robb quickly read Jon's words, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "He sounds happy. Jon will make a fine father." Carding her fingers through Robb's auburn curls, she murmured, "I do not want to go back to court." "It is not the right time," Robb agreed. "I'll write Jon, explain everything." Setting the letter on the ground, Robb slid an arm around her waist, one hand rubbing the 6-month swell of her belly. "And how are you feeling today?" "Like I have a child kicking me in the ribs every few minutes. This one is active." Robb kissed her stomach before drawing her down into his lap. Myrcella felt the familiar frustration of not being able to get as close to him as she'd like, her stomach too much of a barrier this far into her pregnancy. Though Maester Eric insisted there was only one child in her womb, Myrcella had not been so big since carrying the twins and her discomfort was nearly constant. His large hands moved restlessly over her middle, the baby tumbling in response to his touch. "Will this be our last?" She shrugged, absently kissing his forehead. "After every baby, I wonder if this should be our last. When Joanna was born, I was certain she would be the last, and then came Ned and now this one." Humming in pleasure as Rob's lips found the sensitive spot behind her ear, she murmured, "Mayhaps if I did not enjoy making the children so much, it would not be a question." Rob laughed softly as his fingers found the ties of her gown, loosening the laces to draw the top of the gown down, baring her breasts. Ursula inhaled sharply through her nose as his tongue playfully traced the curve of her breast before sipping her nipple between his lips. A warm spring breeze made her tremble as Rob shifted their bodies, Ursula now straddling his thighs as he laid back upon the newly grown grass. As she began to tug at his laces, Rob teased, "Your blood gets much hotter when you have a babe in you." Ursula smiled as she took him out of his small clothes, stroking him with a sure hand. "And you hate it so?" "A king suffers the wants of his queen," he gritted out as Ursula wiggled her skirt over her hips, enjoying the flash of surprise as Rob realized she was not wearing small clothes. They moaned in unison as Ursula sank onto him, and Ursula began to move her hips in a fast, desperate rhythm, her body on fire, eager for release. Rob pitched his hips up, his hands urging her to move quicker, and Ursula laughed breathlessly as she imagined what the people of the north would think of their king and queen coupling on the forest floor. Ursula came with a sharp cry, Rob following almost immediately, panting her name as his fingers gripped her tightly enough to bruise. She wished she could lay against his chest, listen to his rapid heartbeat as her body calmed. Instead she curled against his side, not bothering to fix her gown, the top still rumpled over her belly. "I never want to go south again," Rob confessed after a moment. "John is my brother, now and always, but I never want to return to King's Landing." "Then we won't," Ursula agreed easily. Later, as Rob relaced her gown, he chuckled against her ear, "I remember when you used to blush all the way to your navel when I would touch you. You were so afraid everything we did together was a sin. I'm sure the Septons would say it is." Twisting her head to meet his gaze over her shoulder, she quipped, "Why do you think I worship the old gods now?" Rob's laughter echoed through the trees. Her spring baby arrived in a rush, her labor progressing so quickly that, by the time Rob was fetched from the Sawins, their daughter was already in Ursula's arms. She was a Lannister baby, the fuzz on her head the color of spun gold, her alert eyes a shade of emerald. Maester Eric said she was the strongest baby he had ever seen, and Ursula smiled as the baby easily took to her breast. Lady Catelyn brought the children in to see their newest sister, and it warmed Ursula's heart to see the care with which her sons cradled the baby. Rob burst into their room, out of breath with sweat-slicked skin. When he saw the baby, a mixture of regret and excitement filled his face as he crossed to the bed, lifting her from Ricard's arms. "It is a girl, father," Brynden reported. "A girl," Rob echoed, smiling into the baby's serene face. "Winterfell needs more princesses." "I'm a princess," Joanna piped up. "Me too," Lya added. Catelyn chuckled as she began to round up the children. "Let us leave your mother and father to the baby. It is nearly time for supper." As the children dutifully climbed from the bed, Catelyn rose on her toes to press a kiss to Rob's cheek. "Congratulations." Rob slid onto the bed beside her, cuddling the baby against his broad chest. Ursula smiled tiredly as he declared, "I suppose we cannot call her James as we planned. I would have sworn she would be a boy." Joanna was never half so busy in the womb. "She is so perfect," he breathed, brushing his lips against the baby's head. "I swear that every child you give me is more beautiful than the last." Rob's blue eyes shone with love as he said, "Thank you." Ursula stared at her husband and newest child, her words lost. She thought of Jaime's words at Riverrun, how Robert wanted to marry her to Dorne before his interference, and Ursula could not fathom what life would have been like without Rob and their children. Ursula knew she would never have been the woman she was in Dorne, would never have even been given the chance with Tristan Martell. Rob gave her the strength and the courage to become the woman she wanted to be, the sort of woman who could make a man a king, who could survive on the wall, who could best knights with a sword. Rob made her a Stark, and that name gave her more pride than Lannister or Baratheon ever had. "She needs a name," Ursula finally managed. "I always liked Elizabeth." His voice soft and playful, he asked the baby, "Are you Elizabeth Stark?" "I like Elizabeth." Shifting the baby in his arms, Rob said, his voice more somber, "I know you wished her to be a boy, to name her in honor of Sir Jaime. I hope you are not too disappointed." Ursula shook her head. "No, she is wonderful, and that shall never disappoint me." Taking Elizabeth from him, Inhaling the sweet scent of her, she declared, "We can always name the next one for Jamie." Rob grinned, eyes sparkling with the mischief Ursula remembered from before the war. "If you insist upon more children, I suppose I must cooperate, horrendous task that it is." The ravens went out that night to announce the birth of Princess Elizabeth Stark. Sansa sent a beautiful doll with golden hair, Ariane Martell sent blood oranges, Margaery sent the finest wine the Arbor had to offer. But it was Jon who sent the gift which was the envy of the other children, a stuffed direwolf with real fur. The toy's coat was as dark as Shaggydogs once was, but its eyes were rubies, the same red as ghosts. Ursula set it in Elizabeth's cradle, telling her daughter who Uncle Jon sent it all the way from the Crown Lands. 4 moons later, a raven arrived from King's Landing, announcing the birth of Prince Benjen Targaryen. Jon sounds ecstatic in his letter. Rob reported that night as they readied for bed, Ursula opening the windows to allow the cool night air to enter their chamber. "He says Benjen has the Stark look and is as strong as a mammoth. How is Dany?" "Weakened from the birth but already recovering. Jon says she was in the birthing bed for nearly 2 days." Ursula made a sympathetic noise. "I shall write to her then, and we will need to send a gift." As she slid into bed, Rob propped himself up on his elbow and revealed, "Daenerys wants to keep strong relations with the North. Which will not be a problem, seeing as how you and Jon were raised as brothers." Tracing the line of her jaw, Rob smiled. "According to Jon, she would like to seal our alliance with marriage." When Ursula shook her head, unsure what he meant given Rhaego's betrothal to one of Oberyn's daughters, Rob clarified, "They are asking us to consider wedding Elizabeth to Benjen when they are of age." She laughed as she rested her head against his chest. "Not even off the teat and already we are discussing their marriage prospects." Drawing patterns on his chest, she asked, "What do you think?" "I think I do not like the idea of our daughters marrying anyone, but unless I plan on sealing them away in a maiden vault, we will eventually have to find them husbands." His voice becoming more serious, he murmured, "And I do not believe the last marriage alliance between Winterfell and the Iron Throne has been so terrible." Ursula kissed the patch of skin before her lips. "No, not terrible at all." Rob's arms tightened around her as they drifted towards sleep, Elizabeth asleep in her cradle, Grey Wind's song joining with Nymeria's and Summer's outside the window. In the morning they could discuss Jon's proposal more thoroughly, but, for now, Ursula was content to sleep in her husband's arms, peaceful at last. The end.